Three, two, one. Here we go. Right. Good afternoon. It's 2 here in the UK in the afternoon. A lot has happened in the last few days in regards to the world of sport. Obviously, the biggest news story right now has got to be the FBI investigation into the illegal gambling, money laundering, and wire fraud that involves the NBA. And I haven't read enough on the situation, but I know 34 individuals are involved, including the Portland Trail Blazers head coach. And this in itself is quite a damaging scandal already, considering that I think it was last season, a Toronto Raptors player got a lifetime ban for gambling breaches. And this is not the first time the NBA has had a scandal like this. If you go back about 2 decades, Donahue, the referee, obviously went to federal prison, and there was the NBA sought a court injunction to prevent the publication of his book on his subsequent release from prison. And I can look more into that at some point. But the allegations are exceptionally damaging. We know there's an active criminal investigation ongoing, so therefore we can the information that's out there, we can speculate, what is going on, but it does involve organized crime. It does involve some high-profile NBA players and coaches, and I think the what I would class as the radio silence from the commissioner's office, or the lack of statements from the commissioner's office and the league in general, I think is a deep concern, and the owners, and also the Players Association. I think this scandal was going to be very, very damaging, not only for the NBA but the wider Major League sports, the wide kind of community in North America. I mean, if we're talking about like match fixing and gambling and things like that. Obviously, in European football, for example, we've had plenty of match fixing scandals going back to the 60s, if not before. There's obviously been match fixing scandals in professional sport going back to the big dawn of time. But I think where the major leagues in North America have ended up, and we can talk about Major League Baseball as well, they've got players currently on administrative leave, suspended on full pay, under investigation for betting breaches and betting allegations. I think there's still been no further word on Ortiz and Clase, the Cleveland Guardians players, who are both pitchers for the Cleveland Guardians. But they were suspended in July and August, and there's been not really a lot of news on that. That's gone particularly quiet. Whether that investigation is linked to this one, because there's 34 individuals that have been named, is quite interesting. Yeah, the Rugby League Ashes series has been going nearly as long as the Cricket Ashes series. The Barmy Army originated in 1987 in the Rugby League Ashes series, and it is a term coined by the Australian media, because I think England were getting hammered in this series in the late 80s, and the Australian media were like really, really surprised with how the British fans, because it was Great Britain at the time, rather than England playing in the Ashes, it was Great Britain, how the UK the British fans were just constantly always good spirits, good humour, and they were referred to as the Barmy Army, and then it stuck, and then cricket adopted the Barmy Army, I believe. I think it was either 1990 or 91. It might be to do with the rebel tour to South Africa with Mike Gatting as England captain, who took a rebel tour to South Africa during apartheid. And the Barmy Army sort of transitioned from rugby league to the to cricket, and of course Barmy Army now obviously sell their merchandise and are I think a registered limited company, I believe these days. But the Barmy Army was a term coined by the Australian media in the late 80s, to do with rugby league fans and the fact that Great Britain at the time were getting hammered in this Test series by the Australian Kangaroos. I don't know if it was on a Kangaroo tour here or it was on the reverse tour going the other way, but it was in the late 80s when Mal Meninga's playing. I think it might have been on one of the Invincibles tours, where the Aussies won every game in the 80s, and the Aussie media coined the term Barmy Army in regards to the British support of a team that was getting absolutely hammered. And it stuck, and then it obviously became the cricketing overseas fan group that goes with the England cricket team when they tour overseas, and also when they play here in England, although the Barmy Army is not allowed at Lords, which is a little. Well, they are allowed at Lords, but you have to have a certain dress code, and they don't. The Marylebone Cricket Club, the MCC, look a little bit down their noses at the fancy dress side of the Barmy Army, but that's where the Barmy Army comes from. But yes, the Rugby League Ashes has been going a long time. It hasn't been played for a long time. I think that's where a lot of younger fans don't realise until very, very recently that the Ashes series exists. Obviously, cricket started the Ashes series, but when it comes to international sporting rivalries, Great Britain and then latterly England and Australian Rugby League is one of the oldest. It just amazes me that the two sides haven't met since 2017, the World Cup final in Sydney. I find that one. Was it Brisbane they played the World Cup final in 2017? It just amazes me that they haven't met since the 2017 World Cup final, so pre-COVID. And the fact that an Ashes series hasn't taken place for 2/3 of my life. I mean, honestly, I think what's happened in the last 8 or so years is that gap between Australia and New Zealand and England has widened. And especially since the last Rugby League World Cup a couple of years ago, that gap has significantly widened. And there's been a lot of question marks over, Sean Wayne continuing on as England head coach and the selections of this squad, the performance of the team. The fact that players who were in form were omitted from the squad. That's left a lot of people scratching their heads. Of some of the omissions, like Jake Connor, for example, is just the example I'll use. But there are other players as well who weren't selected, who've had very, very good seasons for their clubs. And the performance yesterday was not great. I felt the first half England were in the game, had opportunities. If Reece Walsh doesn't get in that passing lane, there's the potential for 2 tries there. But that second half performance was really poor. They were second best in a lot of areas. And there's been some, discussion around the refereeing performance by both Aussie fans and English fans. But I think you've got to, if the referee's going to referee like that, you just got to play your game. And Australia played a better game and rode their luck a little bit in that first half. But they were the better side in the first half. I think that was a fair scoreline at half time. But that second half, England were terrible, so deservedly beaten. And go again next weekend up in Liverpool at the Bramley Moore Dock Stadium, the new Everton football stadium. That'll be interesting to see how that plays as a rugby league field with the in goals and the width, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays. Considering we've got apparently some colder, wetter weather coming, and it did rain before kickoff. There was a little bit of rain floating around, and we obviously had a fair bit of rain this week. Maybe that contributed to certain aspects of the game yesterday, but no, not good enough. Not good enough in my opinion. I think Sean Wayne. I don't think he's. If the RFL have got any brains about them, which I don't think they do, because it's the RFL and how they're running the game right now is an absolute shambles. But I don't think he's the coach for the World Cup next year. If he is, I will be really surprised if he is, because I think he's out of his depth. I think his style of coaching has seen its day. I think in the build-up, some of the preparation that's been reported on, like how each individual player, he basically showed negative performances that they had in the season. And basically that's sort of throwing your players under the bus, like going, oh yeah, you did this bad. And rather than, saying, right, this is a thing you can improve on, I think the way he went around it and his coaching style, it just doesn't work anymore. This is not the 1980s, 1990s. The game is fully professional now at the top level. There's a time and a place in certain situations for an old school, go back to basics kind of coaching. There is. It depends on the situation. This is not the situation. But yes, no, the game yesterday, I wouldn't say that was the best game. If you were to watch a really good game, actually watch the Papua New Guinea Cook Islands game for entertainment. And if you want to see how a team can really two evenly matched teams where one team can really blitz another team. Watch what Samoa did to Tonga, which I was not expecting. I was not expecting that game to be so one-sided. Tonga was so bad this morning in the game that I watched, which was obviously in the afternoon over in Brisbane. But that weather delay was ridiculous. Hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes weather delay. It's the second time I think it's happened this season. There was one weather delay earlier in the season, in the regular season, in the club season in Sydney, where a similar storm came over and there was some similar bad weather. But it was predicted to have a bit of that bad weather in the second half, but not on the level that we saw with like thunder, lightning, hail, torrential rain and high winds. I think that wasn't expected. There was expected to be some damp weather in the second half, but not on the level that we had. But there we go. But yes, there's been a lot of discussion talking about the Ashes series in rugby league. A lot of discussion about why it's taken so long to organise a series. Obviously, COVID delayed what was meant to be an Ashes series in 2020 or 2021, and of course, the pandemic and the restrictions imposed by various governments obviously precluded that, and then delaying the World Cup made it a little bit more complex to try and get a Lions or an Ashes series, should we say, because the Great Britain Irish Lions doesn't really, it's only they had a series in 2019, but they were going to have a Lions touring series, like similar to the Ashes, and it's got delayed. There was a Lions, British Lions, Rugby League's Lions tour to Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and Tonga, where the Lions were beaten 3-0 in 2019, just before the pandemic locked everything down, and there were plans in place to have an Ashes series a couple of years ago, but it is a surprise that it's taken this long and this many years to get an Australia-England Test series or going. There's been a big debate around potentially revamping the international calendar a little bit. I do like the Pacific Championships, if I'm honest, although next year's a World Cup year, and so obviously, with that being the case, we won't have a Pacific Championships at the end of the year. We won't have a touring team coming to England at the end of the year. So next year's a World Cup year, and that will be interesting, obviously, on how all that plays out and such. But there is talk about potentially rejigging the International Rugby League calendar and potentially bringing back the Anzac Day test between Australia and New Zealand, and potentially bringing back a mid-season test between England and insert nation here. Now, I think that's difficult considering the current calendar and both the expansion in the NRL and the expansion in the Super League, and trying to fit that into a very congested club regular season calendar. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. Talking about other sports and things, obviously Sheffield Wednesday are in administration. They've been hit with that points deduction, which means they're on -6 points in the championship. And they're now looking for a new owner. The administrators have come in. And guess what? As soon as that happened, fans came back into the stadium, went back to the club shop. So it does show that fan power can have an impact in regards to boycotts and protests and getting things over the line. The club still is not out the woods. There's still that unpaid tax bill. There's still the club debts to consider. And I think there'll be more clubs ending up in administration and in similar situations in the next 12 to 24 months. Hamilton Academical in Scotland have had another points deduction, for example. So the football ecosystem is still fragile, so to speak. But there is that. But give it a couple of weeks, we'll have another international break as well. So I think it's about 2-3 weeks, we'll have another international break. And I think fans are frustrated when it comes to European football with these international breaks. Now, England have qualified for the World Cup next year, but they've got 2 qualifiers to play, which to me, I think there has been discussion. There has been a discussion about looking at the qualification process when it comes to major tournaments and changing. The main sport of Hawaii, they have a very big the University of, I think there's a couple of universities in Hawaii, but I know they're very, very big on American football now in Hawaii with the NCAA and their American football program at collegiate level. Surfing is obviously massive. That's where surfing is actually invented, in Hawaii and Polynesia and all that. So surfing is a big thing as a sport. A lot of windsurfers and paddle boarders and surfers come from Hawaii. It's an interesting one because there's no major leagues in Hawaii in the North American sports kind of thing. It's in a very awkward time zone, when it comes to obviously broadcasting those major league sports from the continental US. So the four major leagues and of course the MLS are the five major leagues. When it comes to TV broadcasting and getting that time zone right, they are in the arse end of nowhere. They are one of the most isolated, populated areas in the world. That is a major population center. They really are in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Pacific. There is obviously there's a big Japanese community. Obviously, there is the native Hawaiian community makes up a significant proportion of the population of Hawaii. But American football is quite big, and any of the water sports like surfing, windsurfing, and paddleboarding are quite big, just because of Hawaii being an island state and surrounded by the Pacific Ocean. And surfing is a massive part of the culture of Hawaii. A lot of the surfing competitions go there, and you will see a lot of the Australian surfers want to go to Hawaii as well, just to take part in competitions. A lot of the international surfing tour go to Hawaii. It's a big part of their tourism. I don't know enough about the sporting makeup of Hawaiian sports fans, if that makes sense. There is that big Polynesian community. There is a big Japanese community. It's a very interesting state. I'd have to have a look at the sports of Hawaii, the sports programs, and also sports fandom, because they are in the middle of the Pacific. It's a difficult one, but of course, with the naval base at Pearl Harbor and of course the other military bases in and around Hawaii and military installations, you do get a lot of obviously military turnover in regards to personnel, and a lot of them may come from different parts of the US. And because baseball's quite big in Japan and Korea, as I was saying, there's a big Japanese community. I would assume baseball is reasonably popular in Hawaii, but it is American football, and because a lot of Polynesians, like from American Samoa and Hawaii, they play American football. Dwayne the Rock Johnson, for example. There you go. But I don't know enough about the sports fandom, because a lot of people go to Hawaii to retire. And there is a fair corporate presence in Hawaii, in Honolulu as well. So there's a lot of people from outside the state who move to the state from the US, and then there are people who go to Hawaii from other parts of the world for a variety of reasons. It'd be interesting to look at the demographics of sports viewership, like when it comes to professional sport, what people in Hawaii as a state watch when it comes to their sports fandom, outside of the collegiate side of things with the University of Hawaii and the other universities in Hawaii. When it comes to their sporting programs, what I think golf's actually quite popular as well. It'll be interesting to actually look at surveys of sports fandom in Hawaii, but it's an interesting state. That's an interesting question. I've actually got a lot of viewers from the US, from Hawaii, so that is an interesting question. But one I don't truly know the answer to, if that makes sense. I think they're in the process of replacing their football and baseball stadium in Honolulu. They're in the process of replacing it. So there are plans for, I think they're in the process of redeveloping the sporting facilities around Honolulu and stuff like that. There's been a lot of questions over the state of the stadium in Honolulu over the years, and how it had structural issues and needed replacement, and it was going to cost a lot of money for the upkeep. There's been talk about the NFL and other major leagues, taking events to Hawaii, either pre-season or regular season games. Um, it's just difficult. And there's also been talk of potentially having like a major league sports franchise in Hawaii of one of the major leagues. But again, it's that TV time zone. It is the population of Hawaii isn't massive as a state, and that limits again the corporate money and sponsorship and TV viewership, because it's just a really it's a unique state and it's a unique situation. But it's an interesting question. Um, it's the time zone is a big problem. So it'd be interesting to see what the TV viewership is for the World Cup next year, for example. Will be. It'd be very, very interesting to see, what the TV viewership in the state of Hawaii is when the World Cup is on. It will be interesting to see in future years when it comes to other major sporting events like the Olympics, for example, and like when the Olympics are in LA, and you've got the Rugby Union World Cup in 2031. What these viewership figures are in the state of Hawaii for these major sporting events that are taking place in the US in the coming decade or so. But it's an interesting one. I mean, when I look at the viewership figures from the US, Hawaii is one of those states that actually is in the top. I think it's still in the top 5 for viewership from viewers from the US. And I think it's partly to do with that Polynesian population there. And a lot of people go on, as you say, for holiday, vacation. A lot of people go from around the world as tourists. And a lot of them do go to Pearl Harbor for the history aspect. A lot of them go there for the surfing as well, and the water sports and the beach sports like volleyball and things like that. And of course, there is a lot of professional surfers are based out of Hawaii. Volleyball does go there. There is the NCAA with the universities with their sporting programs. But I couldn't tell you what they like to watch. That's an interesting question. I would have to have a look at read up on the what sports are popular in the state of Hawaii, and what sports fans in Hawaii, what leagues and teams they follow, because of where the state is. It's so isolated from the rest of not just the US but the world. So it'll be very interesting to see, what sports they watch and teams they support, and look at the athletes that actually were born and raised in Hawaii who are professional athletes, because there are a fair few, and a lot of them are in the NFL, which is really interesting. Hi there, Jordan. How you doing? It's been one of them weeks, and I haven't been making content every day because with the regular day job, it's been a bit mental at the moment. We basically just don't have enough staff to cover everything, and it's a bit of a mess at the moment. We've had staff leave. We're relying heavily on agency staff to plug the gaps, which is not great. And there's just a lot of going on. We're sort of in a transitional phase where the old contract is ending and another company comes in next year, and we don't have a clue what's going on. It's been hectic, so I've had some very late finishes in the last couple of weeks, and the weather hasn't been too bad, but it hasn't been great. There's been some bad weather, some good weather. I think we're going to have rain in a bit. It's going to rain I think it's going to rain for the rest of the day here. We're due to have some rain. Yes. Well, Sheffield Wednesday. Interesting. I don't know with Sheffield Wednesday. That's a 12-point deduction. It's going to be difficult. I think the fans need to accept the reality they're going to be a League One club next season. They still have the unpaid tax bill. They still have the debts that need to be restructured. But there is talks that I have seen reports of a fan-led group potentially coming in as part of an ownership group, so fan-owned, which will be interesting. I suggest that might be a solution to what happens. We could potentially see Sheffield Wednesday become a fan-owned club, like Exeter City, obviously in years past. I think they get relegated though. They just haven't got the strength of squad. They still have, because of the late payment of players and non-playing staff on multiple occasions, there are sanctions still from the Football League in place, which means it's very hard to strengthen that squad in January, unless they can find a free agent or a loan, use the loan system to plug the gaps. It's gonna be a tough season. I think the EFL, there needs to be questions asked of the Football League yet again about yet another another owner coming in who just should not have been around the football club. It's a messy situation, but there is a silver lining. Hopefully, they can come out of administration as quick as possible. But there's still the issue of that unpaid tax bill. There's still all the owed taxes, and there's still the issue of the club debts that need to be structured and paid, and that's a problem. So unless they have one of their young youth players or one of the players they signed on a free contract, as a free agent for the season, unless a player just suddenly goes on a rich vein of form and a bigger club in the Championship or the Premier League or one of the European leagues scouting around, which could help their financial situation in regards to some of the outstanding debt the club owes and the tax bill. It's going to be a long process, but the club, I think, will survive, given if the right ownership comes in. And if it is a fan-led ownership group, it will be a long, tough road, but I think they can go in the right direction from now going forward. But I think they're relegated. I can't see how they can get out of the situation. In saying that, it does give them a hope for the future that a decent owner comes in and they can build for the future. It will be a long process. It won't happen quickly. It will be a long process to get the off-field situation in order. There's also issues with the stadium upkeep. There's parts of the stadium that are falling apart. So there's issues there with the state of Hillsborough, which is not the most modern stadium in the world. Hillsborough is an aging facility, much like Bramall Lane. It's an aging facility, but Bramall Lane's in good upkeep. Hillsborough is not in good upkeep. And that's, again, on previous owners over a long period of time, which is a concern. But look, they can trend in the right direction now. It's going to be a long process. It won't be easy, but they can get there. It's going to take time. But I do fear that had they gone bust, I think it would have seriously screwed up, the league going forward. Look, it just shows how cutthroat the league is. Coventry are doing really well, and it wasn't that long ago they were in a similar situation at the wrong end of the table. So it just shows how much of a crazy league the Championship is. There are some clubs that are struggling, yes, and my club is one of those clubs included. And again, you look at this. Apart from Wrexham, there's some ownership issues at some of these clubs. I think Ipswich, Ipswich for some reason they went on a run at the right time, made it to the Premier League for that one season, and I don't think they were planning for that. Neither were Luton when they went on their run. Now, Norwich. Wrexham, I think, are finding the reality's hit for Wrexham a little bit now. They've been on this fantastic run of success, and now this is the reality of, hey, you're climbing up the league ladder. It's not as easy as you think. You're going to hit that point where you go, okay, we need to stabilize a little bit. We've had a run of promotions, and hang on, we've now reached a league where it's a little bit more serious. There's some clubs that are a little bit more established, and there you go. Southampton are in. Southampton. Look at that. Since gaining promotion to the Premier League, they've won twice at home in 2 years. So Southampton are in trouble. Arsenal win the league this year? Potentially, but look, we're not even at the end of October. We've got the third international break of the season to come, and then, of course, the FA Cup third round becomes a reality at the end of December, beginning of January. We have the January transfer window. Anything could happen between now and January. January is the time. December, January is the time where you get a good idea of who's going to actually be competing for silverware and who's going to be missing out, because that's when, as I say, the latter stages of the League Cup, you have the FA Cup third round where the Premier League sides enter the comp, and and those teams that can deal with the festive period without a drop off in form, that's where injuries start mounting and suspensions start becoming an issue. Is that festive period with the fixture overload and so many fixtures in a very short space of time. That's when your squad depth gets tested. That's when you as a manager or a coach, when you're trying to, that's when they get tested. And I think while Arsenal are in a good position now because Liverpool are having a poor start to the season, have had a bit of wobbly form. Man City aren't invincible anymore, and some of the other clubs that were challenging around, Bournemouth. Don't discount Bournemouth for being a dark horse. Seriously, Bournemouth are very dangerous this season. Do not discount them. It's a very more. I think it's a very open league. It's the most open league we've seen this season. If Bournemouth can continue playing like they're playing, they could be dangerous and a dark horse. And I think Arsenal have come up short so many times in recent seasons since winning the FA Cup in 2020. They've come up short on multiple occasions, and that is the problem. That is the problem. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more managers go before the transfer window opens. Absolutely, it's a reality. That is the reality. I think multiple clubs are going to see managerial change this season. The fact Nottingham Forest are on their third manager of the season tells you all you need to know about the situation. And I do think we're going to see more managerial casualties. I know Airdrie in Scotland just sacked their manager yesterday. Obviously, we've had what's happened at Nottingham Forest. I think, yeah. So we'll see what happens. I can see a lot more managerial turnaround, more managerial movement. The fact that I think Hearts are actually going to win the SPL. I think we're going to have the end of the old firm dominance. I think Hearts are going to win the SPL. I've got a good friend. She's a Hibs fan. She's not happy with Hearts leading the league at the moment. But at the same time, while she calls them the cretins, I said it's in Scottish football needs this. It needs this desperately. And I think Hearts, in the way they're playing, Celtic, I think Celtic might get rid of Brendan Rodgers, I really do. And with the way Rangers, with their managerial mess, that's what it's become. You could see what is it? Roll, I think his name is the new guy who's come in. I can't see him lasting the season either if this carries on. But there's a lot of frustration at Celtic because they're not winning all the time. But this is what Scottish football needs. It needs something to change things. Liam Manning, yeah, I think we'll see what happens with Norwich. Wrexham Cardiff sellout. That's going to be a fantastic atmosphere. And if Wrexham win that changes the bottom end of the table a little bit. As a Blackburn fan, we won yesterday whilst not playing well. So don't hold your horses yet. A couple of wins completely changes, or a draw here, a couple of draws, win here or there, completely changes the dynamic in the bottom half of the table. Arsenal has got a good defence at the moment. Birmingham, I think that they've got expectant owners who are impatient. So there's that. Arsenal's defence has been good to start the season. Wait, as I say, next international break could be some injuries come out of that. Then Christmas period, FA Cup third round onwards, gets congested. Squad depth will get tested. Right, we go. How fucked are England for games 2 and 3 when it comes to Australia? Sean Wayne, I think he's done as coach. I think looking at the full-time whistle when he comes down to the touchline, the camera pans on him, he knows he's done. But this is the RFL running the game, so that's how the Bradford Bulls got back into Super League, because somehow their old chief executive suddenly joined the RFL board and suddenly, they're allowed in, and they were ranked 10th on grading with their stadium, which is a death trap, which is partially condemned, with their on long-term financial instability. Make it make sense. I can't, but that's the way it is. But jokes aside about IMG grading in the RFL, it's not looking good. Not looking good at all. I honestly, I think Sean Wayne should go. But who do you replace him with as coach? Who do you replace him with? any coach worth their salt signing up long term. Like Jason Demetrius just signed up a 3-year contract with London Broncos and is also coaching Papua New Guinea at the moment internationally. So he's tied up with his contracts there. Wayne Bennett's tied up with Souths, and I don't think they're going to want to really let him coach an international side. Mal Meninga's, if you were to say, let's get Mal Meninga in, because he's obviously coached the Aussies for years in Queensland, been really successful. He's now obviously agreed to coach the Perth Bears when they come in the league in a couple of years' time. It's an interesting one. If Hearts win, it'd be good. I don't think they're going to get ready for players. I think they're going to try and put in big buyout clauses, and with what's happening at Celtic and Rangers, with fans basically protesting their boards, it's an interesting one. But yeah, who do you get to replace Sean Wayne? One of the options is Sam Burgess, ironically. Although this season at Warrington didn't go as planned. They didn't have the best season after the Challenge Cup final. Their season sort of fell away. But as a young coach who can have a good, relationship with a lot of the players he would have played with and against as well, which is very, very crucial. You would have a good relationship with a lot of the senior players left in the squad. That could be interesting. But I think the RFL, there's a lot of problems there. But I'm very concerned about the potential for 2 further blowout scores. I don't think Hearts will get raided in January. I think they'll get raided at the end of the season, if I'm honest. It's a big risk mid-season if you want, because this is where the board and the manager can go to the players. If you stick around, we can win. You leave, you won't win silver. If you stick here, you can win. We can build something, and then the players will know. Actually, if they do win the SPL title and they do win the Scottish Cup, for example, they can then get more money in their contracts. And I do think the board will be smart to offer contract extensions and big get-out clauses in contracts. Players want a league title. They won't want to go to a championship or a League One or a mid-table Premiership side that's not going to win anything. So there's that. And look, the Scottish League is not at the same level as what it was in the 90s, let's be honest. It's declined massively since its heyday. Scottish football in the 70s and 80s was right up there with the other European leagues. Then the 90s, English clubs are allowed back into Europe, and the drop-off begins mid-90s with Scottish football, and has continued for 30 years. I've done multiple videos on the subject discussing Scottish football. I think the players are committed to what's happening at Hearts. And then, look, 1 title can become 2 titles. 2 titles can become 3 titles. And then you start building some momentum of your own. And then you challenge the old firm dominance. And it completely changes the dynamic. And it changes it doesn't matter if they win back-to-back titles. That changes the dynamic, because it's not Celtic, it's not Rangers. And then that makes the league, again, suddenly competitive, and then investment. This is something you've got to pitch to the TV companies, to sponsors, to potential investors, to your fans. Continued success. And this is where I think it is good for the league, yeah. Admittedly, my friend Chloe, she's not happy as a Hibs fan that it is Hearts leading the league. She would like it to be Hibs, but she does refer to them as those cretins from the other side of the city. But in saying that, and I will stress this, the fact that they're now that far ahead, I think Brendan Rodgers is going to not see out the season. Obviously, what's happening at Rangers, they're having a disastrous time right now. It completely changes the dynamic. That the old firm are looking very vulnerable. Aberdeen have not had a great season either so far. Those 3 clubs all struggled in Europe so far, embarrassingly so. And that adds fuel to the fire that Scottish football's not very good. And then you look at some of the Scottish players who are playing really well in leagues across Europe, McTominay being the prime example of a player who's playing at an elite level and is an elite player. It's suddenly, there is a problem with Scottish football. I think Steve Clarke is the best national manager the national side's had forever. The problem is, once they get to major tournaments, is winning a game, which they haven't done for a long time. And there is problems. And I look on social media week after week. Europe domestically, and it's Scottish football fans, especially of the Celtic, Rangers, and Aberdeen. Their fan groups, their fans are they're ripping the boards to pieces. They're not happy with how their clubs are performing, and Hearts, as an example, I mean, if Hearts can keep this up, I mean, that completely changes the dynamic. And yeah, you might sell one player, make some big money. You can reinvest that in the squad. You can pinch some players from Celtic, from Rangers, from Aberdeen, from the Championship. And yeah, it is good. But Crystal Palace are dark horses. I think Crystal Palace can be dangerous in both Europe and the League and the FA Cup again in the League Cup. Glasner is a very good manager. Very good manager. I think he's highly underrated. And he sort of, well, the way he orchestrated the defeat of Munich in the German DFB Pokal in 2018, 3-1 with Eintracht Frankfurt, started off a little bit of a run of form for Frankfurt, where they started to get a little bit of success. And it's sort of said to other German clubs, Munich are vulnerable. And then Xabi Alonso with Bayer Leverkusen proved you can actually break records with a club that isn't Bayern Munich domestically and embarrass the German league easily and lose one game on a season, which was a European final. Aberdeen lost 6. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Aberdeen obviously. What can you say to that? What can you say to that when you're getting thrashed? It's not as if AEK Athens are a terrible side. They're not terrible. Let's be honest. But they're not like the toughest opposition in the world. And when you put, having 6 thumped past you, that's a statement. That's a statement. It's not as if the Greek league is necessarily the most competitive league either. It's really not. But that's a statement. Well, the way the Champions League format is currently structured, I don't think is a good structure. Myself, again, the way as I say, the way it's structured, I don't necessarily think. I don't pay too much attention to this stage of the Champions League. The fact that I don't really follow the European Cup competitions anymore, partly because it's behind a frigging paywall, and I'm not paying the price that Discovery Plus want for a monthly fee. Just not paying it. Sorry, I cannot afford that. I cannot justify that. I will just watch the 3 European finals on my free account. I am not paying the money they are asking for a product that, in my opinion, is not of the same level and quality that we saw 20 to 25 years ago. I think UEFA have definitely got the structure. It's shit. I'm sorry. The quality of football now is shit. You put that Real Madrid side now against the Real Madrid side of Zidane's era. It's no contest. Absolutely no contest. Ajax and Frankfurt's not a bad side, so they really had an off night. But Liverpool haven't been playing well. Arne Slot is under some pressure. He is, and the signings haven't performed. Ishak has not performed, but then there's that debate about when he refused to train and play, or he was cast out of the Newcastle squad, and the fans turned against him, and then his teammates turned against him in Newcastle. I think when he's gone to Liverpool, some of his teammates have gone and coaches have gone, if he doesn't look what he's done at Newcastle, we may have brought a toxic element into the squad, which is going to damage the squad. Yeah, but you say, oh, they should be winning every competition. You say that, but at the same time, you can spend money, win nothing. The Galacticos era of Real Madrid, for example, they spent a lot of money and didn't win nearly as much as the talent on the field suggested they would. You can put a team of superstars together, but that's a team of individuals, or you can have a team where there's some good players, but they work as a team, not as individuals, and they win. So Palace, Man City in the FA Cup final. Superstars, great individual skill, hard working players. System wins. Egos lost. I rest my case. I just rest my case. You say that, but I think what is interesting, talk about money. The Barcelona the Villarreal Barcelona game that was meant to take place in Miami on either December the 20th or 21st. And now suddenly the La Liga went, oh no, we can't do it now. And Villarreal said they haven't been promised any money. Barcelona said they've been paid as soon as they get on the plane. And La Liga, that went down like a sack of shit, didn't it? Because the players were like, of all the clubs, we're just going to protest. And I think the fan reaction, the player reaction, the players' union, this is the second attempt Barcelona and La Liga have attempted to take a game overseas to the US, and it has failed. And the players have had a big part to play in it. This is why I don't think the European Super League works. This is why I think the European Super League does not go ahead. Now, the AC Milan Como game obviously is at the moment slated to be played in Perth. We shall see if that, pans out. Now, AC Milan are saying it's because of the Winter Olympics. We haven't got a stadium to play in, etc., etc., etc. This is when the game is meant to be scheduled, and Serie A have gone, yeah, you can do it. We shall see what happens with Italian players and Italian fans. No, I don't think it does. I don't think the Super League happens. Not with how the players have responded to La Liga's attempts on 2 occasions now to take regular season games overseas. I don't think it happens. Really don't. I think Real Madrid and Barcelona are now so at war with each other over the attempt by La Liga to take games to the US that Perez and Real Madrid have come out. I don't think it does. I think Real Madrid and Barcelona are the only 2 clubs left signed up to it, and they hate each other. And I can see now that the politics are at play with the Spanish FA and La Liga, where it's Barcelona and Real Madrid again. And I think that's going to hurt the Spanish national side when it comes to the World Cup next year. And I think we're going to see, again, as I say, Barcelona and Real Madrid with their money issues, because they got a lot of debt. This is the problem. But they elect presidents. They're not owned by a private entity. They are owned by the fans. The fans elect a president. The members elect presidents. They've got money problems, and this is why they've still stuck with the European Super League. No one else has. They've realised that we could have mass boycotts, which will hurt our bottom line, and it's very bad form to try and sell to broadcasters empty seats at stadiums. There's only so much you can do to hide them. Like the Rugby League yesterday at Wembley, they could not hide those empty seats. And people are going, oh, it's a record crowd and all this. We've got 64,000 or something in Wembley. 2/3 of the upper tier is fenced off. And the lower bowl, there were empty seats in the lower bowl. I am sorry, Rugby League does not work at Wembley anymore. It does not work at the new Wembley. And you cannot hide those empty seats. You cannot. It was embarrassing. And everyone will go, oh, it was a great attendance. Yeah, okay. Yeah, at the Emirates, yeah. At the Emirates, that's a good attendance at the Emirates or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Absolutely. Play it there. That would look a lot better. Like the Rugby League World Cup semi-final a couple of years ago was played at the Emirates. Fantastic. The atmosphere was brilliant. Nearly sold out. Wembley, they're claiming that is a success when you've got 1/3 of the stadium empty. It looks really, really shit on TV. And this is what's going to happen when you have the European Super League. Fans ain't going to turn up to that. You cannot sell a product. You cannot flog a product to the international broadcasters when there are empty seats. You cannot. It looks bad. It looks horrendous. And now we're seeing with this Rugby 360 competition, this R360, I don't think that takes place either. I think that's going to be litigation after litigation after litigation and cause more harm to a sport than good that is craving for grassroots investment in rugby, or just both codes, but rugby union, right? And there's going to be no grassroots investment involved with this. Money's going to be taken out of the game. And a handful of spivs and some dodgy player agents are going to make a lot of money. Um, no, West Ham at times, since they've been at the London Stadium, have sold it out. The team is playing garbage. Doesn't help. There is a very frustrated, angry fan base. It's a passionate fan base. The reason why they're there is they've got a very, very favourable lease agreement with the London Olympic Legacy Corporation, which is basically the mayor's office in London. Yeah, the stadium's shit. It doesn't work for football. It doesn't. We can all agree on that. It doesn't even work for the Major League Baseball games that Major League Baseball has taken here since 2019. It works for track and field athletics, and it works sort of as a it's a multi-sport stadium. Doesn't work for football. I think they played rugby union and rugby league there over the years. It is a good multi-purpose facility, but it does not work for football. And some of the sight lines are really poor. But the West Ham board, the ownership, were like, we've got a really favourable lease agreement here, which is beneficial to them. It is. Now, the current mayor of London, and we don't like the current mayor of London, we think he's a clown, but Sadiq Khan doesn't like the lease agreement that's been signed by the previous mayor, Boris Johnson, and he's sort of politicised that a little bit. He wants to renegotiate the lease, but the lease has been negotiated for a very, very long time. It's very favourable to West Ham. West Ham don't want to renegotiate because it will cost them more money. And the London Mayor's office, to be fair, West Ham make a lot of money using that stadium. And they don't want to cancel their lease or renegotiate their lease. It's favourable to them. And we'll see what happens when the next mayoral elections happen in London. But West Ham, on a business standpoint, the stadium is favourable to them. What other issues came into play was Leyton Orient and Spurs, because Tottenham, when the stadium came up for tender for lease, White Hart Lane, they hadn't fully planned to rebuild it, rotate it 90 degrees and rebuild it and turn it into a space station, basically a bedpan with some funky shit inside. Who needs a go-kart track at a football stadium? You know when you've been levied. Yes. So, jokes aside, so Tottenham hadn't fully decided on, we're going to rebuild White Hart Lane. We will consider potentially using the Olympic Stadium. Now, they also were thinking about potentially ground sharing with West Ham, whilst White Hart Lane was also being upgraded and rotated 90 degrees and rebuilt. In the end, they ended up with Wembley because the FA wanted to make some money, because the FA, money, and that's at the time the FA were trying to flog Wembley as well. So you can see what's going on here. And so London's got some really good stadiums, but Arsenal fans took their time to warm to the Emirates. Spurs fans were a bit dubious about the White Hart Lane rebuild. I still find it funny they haven't got a title sponsor for that stadium either, which is really interesting considering the amount of money they spent on it. Now, they've obviously signed that long-term agreement with the NFL for at least 2 games per season to be played there. And they've also got that retractable pitch. Now, whether that NFL pitch is a long-term thing, stays, we don't know. They've also put a go-kart track at the bottom. I don't understand that. But that's ENIC for you. That's Joe Lewis, and Levy stepped down, but that's Joe Lewis for you. Milking the fans, and 1 trophy in 20 years tells you all you need to know about Spurs. But Arsenal fans took a long time to warm to the Emirates. I wouldn't say all the Spurs fans have necessarily warmed to the rebuilt White Hart Lane, necessarily. But from what I can gather, a lot of them are quite happy with it. A lot of away fans are happy with it. When the NFL's there, people are happy with it. Rugby League's been played there. I think it was a Challenge Cup final when Wembley wasn't available. So sports fans are sort of warming a little bit more to the new White Hart Lane. I'll always call it White Hart Lane. That's what it will always be to me. Look, Leyton Orient did also put in a legal challenge because Leytonstone, and obviously where Leyton Orient played, it's literally up the road. And so Tottenham wanted to consider looking at it. Leyton Orient, there was 3 clubs basically. I mean, you could have imagine having 3 clubs in that stadium. You say Orient don't have the fan base. I think there's actually an underrated fan base there because West Ham have actually moved into Leyton Orient's catchment area, and that's the irony of it. Orient have had some bigger crowds than what their stadium currently holds historically. But West Ham, for whatever reason, left Upton Park. And a lot of West Ham fans, considering the money that they spent on upgrading Upton Park in the last years they were there, they did spend money. They did spend money in the last decade and a half they were there, upgrading the Bulling Ground, Upton Park, upgrading the facility and increasing the capacity. And you could argue that was money wasted, and the club did yo-yo a little bit between the Premier League and the Championship. Look, at the end of the day, there is a lot of fan frustration with the club. The stadium doesn't work for football, and that's the problem. But you've got that Olympic legacy, and it would become a white elephant if that stadium remains underused. If they were to move now, I look, they've got this very favourable lease. I can't see them planning to move anytime soon. It would be nice if there were some improvements made to some of the seating layout, some of the sight lines. I think how they've converted the stadium from an athletics track and field stadium to a football stadium. Some of the seating, okay, yeah, they still have track and field athletics on a regular basis. There is some attractable seating. Obviously, the Major League Baseball will be coming back next year to play games there. So, it is a stadium with it's a multi-purpose stadium. But like I say, it's very similar to a lot of North American stadiums in that regard. And a lot of them were criticised during the FIFA Club World Cup. Now, I'm just going to renegotiate myself, reorientate myself, because I love having a bad back. I just love being middle-aged. People forget I'm only 36. I love being middle-aged because your body just hurts. Everything hurts. No, in regards to the stadium, it is a sizable facility. It's a modern facility. Well, when I say it's a modern facility, it's 13 years old now. It's not exactly, well, it opened 13 years ago. It's not a modern facility as in built yesterday, but it's still a reasonably modern facility. But there are issues with it. There were issues with it when West Ham moved in. There was a lot of issues with it in the going. It's bloody feeling it. I tell you, I'm 36. I'm 36 in just over a month's time. I'm feeling it. People are so surprised that I was born in 1989. People are stunned. People think I'm people think I'm younger than I actually am. You can't see it here, but there's actually a few grey hairs. But no, I think with how things are going, I think Arsenal, as I say, Arsenal have a very good chance to win the league. You've got to get through the festive period and the fixture congestion. That's when your squad depth is tested. You've also got a European campaign to think about. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Arsenal. But they are playing better than they did last season. And teams that they were fighting with for the European places and for the title with last year, so Liverpool and Nottingham Forest, they're not playing as well this season. And so that, I think, has helped them. But then you've got clubs like Bournemouth who are dangerous. They can score goals. You've got Crystal Palace, who've now got the taste of silverware. And you've got some of these dark horses like Brighton, for example, who on their day can score 5, 6 goals, 7 goals. But it's a very topsy-turvy league. There's a lot of craziness that's happened so far. And looking at it, there's a lot of clubs that I think are, much like West Ham, got very frustrated fan bases. But it's. But yes, it is what it is. But yes, no, I am 36 in 5 weeks. something like that. What's the date? 26th of October. The second test is the 1st, which is in 6 days' time. It's next week. Yeah, it's 6 weeks. 6 weeks. 6 weeks and 36. Wow. It's amazing to think. It's amazing to think that I left school 20 years ago. 20 years ago next summer. Yeah, it's been 19 and a half years since I finished school. And that's mad. But no, what I've and that summer, obviously, we had the 2006 World Cup in Germany, and that was one of my favourite World Cups. You're 29 next year. What is old anyway? Older than you. What is old? I mean, when I was a kid, I thought anyone over the age of 20 was ancient. I really did. And you know, my dad was 30 when I was born, so, and I thought my dad was ancient, and he was when I was a kid growing up, he was in his he was the same age as I am now, when we were sat watching Challenge Cup finals and FA Cup finals, test matches, cricket. And so my dad would be the age I am now. And I thought he was ancient. I actually thought I thought he was decrepit and old and all that. He really wasn't. He really wasn't. He was the same age as I am now. But what is interesting is, in my family, other than my father who's now passed away, my dad's passed away nearly 16 years ago. But apart from my dad, I'm the only other member of my family who's a massive rugby league fan, for example. When it comes to cricket, okay, my stepdad is a cricket fan, but I was already a fan of cricket before my mum met my stepdad. So it's an interesting dynamic when people say, "Oh, your fandom is hell." Normally everyone in the family is a fan. I'm the only member of my family who's a big fan of ice hockey. I'm the only member of my family who's a big fan of rugby league. And apart from my stepdad, I'm the only member of my family who's a massive fan of cricket. So, and people say, "Oh, it's generally you've got a parent or both parents who are fans of a sport, so you become a fan of a sport." Not really the case. Although my dad did obviously play all these sports in the army. Other than my dad, who I didn't spend a lot of time with because of his army service and my parents' separation, I just, well, we had Eurosport, we had cable, so just thing. And I very quickly worked out all the sports channels on TV. So what I seem to remember, I do remember this. I was ill. I think I had chicken pox or bronchitis. It was one or the other. I was very ill at the time. It was either bronchitis or chicken pox. And I was sort of not allowed out the house because I was contagious. And it was a weekend or something like that. And my mum had a friend come over, and my mum's friend she was really into her superbikes. So this is a funny story. And she had this lovely Honda CB. Oh God, it was CB. Was it CBR 500 or CBR 750? It was basically the top end superbike at the time. 1000cc bikes were exceptionally rare at this point in the 90s. So a top end bike was like a 500 two-stroke or a 750 V-twin, whatever it was, and CBR whatever. And it was in the funky colours. Anyway, I'm a kid, and I'm like not. I am like really like medication, antibiotics, like not very well, like phlegm, just pure utter plague. But this is what's really interesting. So my mom's friend goes, "Let's put Cartoon Network on," because I've obviously got Eurosport on, or Grandstand, or whatever sports program. Probably Eurosport, I think. And my mum looks at her friend and goes, "Don't do that." She's like, she puts Cartoon Network on, and she goes away, and then suddenly you've got Murray Walker and doing some commentary on the F1. She sticks her head around the corner, or whatever, or Charlie Cox on the touring cars. I can't remember, but we'll go with Eurosport because that's highly likely what I was watching. And then suddenly you've got motorsport commentary, and you have this rather attractive woman in her 30s. If I go back in time, now obviously she'll be like a grandmother and all that, but she sticks her head out the kitchen. She goes back, she puts car, And my mum goes, seriously, don't do that. It's like, why? He'll just keep changing the channel back to the sport. He knows what time all the sports events start. Trust me, do not touch that TV remote. He'll be quiet for 17 hours. Don't touch it. And I would and she very quickly learned I put Cartoon Network on a Saturday at between 9 a.m. and 7:30 in the evening. I will just change the channel. I will just change the channel. And yeah, that was kind of a lesson learned. I think that happened on more than one occasion where, like, my mum would have some work colleagues over or old school friends come over on weekends, normally in the summer, have a little barbecue. And it literally was, let's put cartoons on for the kid. And my mum was like, just don't do that. Just let him watch the sport. Just don't touch the TV remote. Live and Kicking's over now. He's going to be watching sport. He's Live and Kicking's finished now. He will be watching the sport. Don't. He'll be quiet. He'll be quiet. Just let him listen to Murray Walker, Charlie Cox, and Tiff Needell. Don't touch the TV remote. It will end badly. He will just let him listen to Ray Warren on the Rugby League. Don't touch the TV remote. It's dangerous. He'll be quiet. It's true. As like 30 years ago, literally, let's say this is the TV remote, which is not, it's my light remote. So I've got my lighting. There you go. See? So we've got my light remote. I would grab that and I would just change the channel. And it became a bit of a running joke, like, don't disturb him. He'll be quiet. And then, yeah, my sister found out the hard way as well when she was watching. What was my sister watching? This would be quite funny. My sister had a thing for QVC. Now, if you remember the QVC shopping channel, it's still going, by the way, on satellite TV and cable from multiple providers. My sister had a thing where she just liked watching the QVC shopping channel. Price Drop TV is another one. QVC is an American channel that's very popular over here as well. And I remember in the summer of '99, obviously my mum's now done her accountancy qualification. And so she changed jobs. She became an accountant, a corporate accountant working in accounts departments for big tech firms. Anyway, so my mum's at work, my sister's in charge, and my sister had a thing for QVC. Now, my sister wasn't well in the summer of '99 for a few weeks. I think, I mean, what, she either had glandular fever or she had hay fever. She was quite ill for a couple of weeks. And so much like I was a few years earlier, bedridden, not allowed out, got to stay in, but, you're in charge of babysitting the creature, which was me. Now, we did obviously have the PlayStation, and I believe we had the PS2, so we had some video games we could play, but there was a period where my sister watched QVC, and then my mum looked at her credit card bill at the end of the month, and she was like, where has all this money gone? And then suddenly all these deliveries turned up from QVC, and my sister had ordered a lot of crap. And this was the late 90s. So yes, QVC, my mum very quickly decided to try and change the subscription for cable, saying we don't want this channel anymore. But it was one of the free channels you got on the subscription, so you couldn't cancel QVC. But that was quite funny. That was the first time my sister did a big fuck up when it came to not buying stuff on mum's credit card. The fact that was 27 years ago. Wow. 27 years ago. Mad. But that was the thing. We had QVC, and for that 2 weeks I had to deal with my sister being rather obnoxious, and then she was less plague ridden. And my mum booked a couple of weeks off work, and then I was allowed to watch Eurosport again. So we all won. It was fine. That was actually quite a good summer, '99. That was a fantastic summer. I had a really good summer that year. I remember it vividly. I think we all had a good summer, apart from my sister not being well. But yeah, the QVC incident was quite funny. It was one of several. This is also the summer that my sister blew up the microwave the first time as well. Why she put a metal pan in there, I don't know. She was trying to make beans on toast and she blew up the microwave and shorted out the kitchen. And for some reason, as a kid, with my sister constantly setting off the fuse box, I worked out how to trip box worked, and how fuses worked, and how to reset the fuse box, which is quite funny. And oh yeah, this is the original Top Gear. No, not the Jeremy Clarkson. Well, the Top Gear that James made was fired from the first time. Yes, the Noel Edmonds Top Gear was still on the TV at the time. There was only 3 episodes where Takeshi's Castle was one, I think, or 6. I think more people have walked on the moon than have won Takeshi's Castle. Red Bull's involvement in sports? No, I haven't. I've done videos where I've discussed Red Bull and some of the teams that they own, like Leeds United, where they've now bought sponsorship in Leeds United. And I've done some match reviews, and I've looked at some individual athletes where we've discussed it. But I've never done a video on Red Bull and their sports ownership, because it is very controversial. Yes, it is very controversial. They've got big sponsorship. They've got a massive stake in motorsport. Obviously, not just through the F1, but a variety of racing categories in motorsport, in bike, on 2 and 4 wheels, and on the water, and the Red Bull Air Race. So Red Bull, I believe, it starts with the motorsport. I believe it starts either with motocross or... No, was it motocross? But hang on a second, because I've got some Red Bull memorabilia here. And this goes back to before they were involved in F1. Hold on one second. Yes. So we're going back to World Superbikes from the 90s, early 2000s. And this is before they had an F1 team. So yeah, before they had an F1 team, they had a Ducati. They were sponsoring one of the Ducati World Superbike teams. So I have that, which I've got to do some weathering treatment on. I've got to waterproof that. I don't ride anymore, but I do wear that out and about, because it's a very, very comfy jacket. It's a very comfy jacket. But that's an old jacket, that is. A friend gave it to me as was it a 30th birthday present? It was pre-COVID. Or was it a 28th birthday present? I can't remember. I got given that jacket, I'm going to say 2018 or 2019. It was either my 29th or 30th birthday, I got given that jacket as a birthday present. But it was already an old jacket that I think my friend had found in a charity shop, I believe, or he found it online secondhand. It's the race replica. It's the 2-piece race replica. But that's back in the day when Red Bull sponsored one of the Ducati World Superbike teams. And I found that quite interesting. But no, I've never done a video looking at Red Bull as, their involvement in sport. But I can. I mean, I've looked at other sports ownership groups over the years, like MSG, or no, FSG, sorry, who own Liverpool, and some other sporting entities, like the Boston Red Sox. Fenway Sports Group, obviously, because Fenway Park. It's an old jacket. It's old, but there we go. But I can look at Red Bull, but they're not the only company that, as a corporate entity, where they've established their product. So Red Bull energy drinks, so soft drinks. But you've got Bayer with Bayer Leverkusen. You've got Volkswagen with Wolfsburg. And there's a few other companies that have come along and they've ended up buying sports teams. But no, I haven't done one on Red Bull. I can look at it. I can look at the various teams that they have ownership stakes in the various sports. But they did start out motorsport. So that's a motorcycle jacket. But obviously they've got motorsport. They've got sponsorship in the V8 supercars, F1, rallying, obviously football. Now rugby union with Newcastle. They've got various motorcycle sponsorships. They've got sponsorships in GT racing, endurance racing, bikes and cars, Red Bull Air Race, speedboats. The speedboat racing, they sponsor a lot there. They sponsor individual drivers, riders, and athletes in the extreme sports, including skiing, snowboarding, ski cross, snowboard cross, a whole variety of extreme sports. They've got a lot, but then you've got Monster Energy from the US, and they own several teams as well in motorsport. And then you've got a whole variety of primarily energy drink sponsors. So I prefer Monster, although I do occasionally drink Red Bull. And yeah, there is it's an interesting one. I will have to look into that. But yeah, that's a nice jacket. I don't wear it all the time. It's a going out jacket now. I used to wear it obviously riding, but now I wear it as a going out jacket. It's comfortable. It's nice. I've got some waterproofing treatment stuff that I've got to treat it with because it protects the leather and all that. And that takes a good, is that a good 12-hour process? Something stupid like that. You've got a foam that you scrub and it clears everything off, and you wipe it down, let it dry, and then you put on the wax and it protects it for 6 months. It's kind of cool. What you thought Red Bull would invest in Milton MK Dons rather than Leeds? I think Leeds is a more attractive proposition, in part because of the current ownership of Leeds, who also own the 49ers in the NFL. They wanted to find some extra investment. Red Bull wanted to get into the UK sports market outside of F1, which is actually more of an international team. Red Bull Racing is more of an international team because of the Renault aspect in the past, which is obviously that was French, but there's an Anglo-French thing there. They wanted to get into expand their portfolio in regards to the UK sports market. They get involved with Leeds, and now they got involved with Newcastle Falcons, now Newcastle Red Bull. I'm not keen on that name change, so it's going to be the Newcastle Falcons to me, but they've now got into rugby union for the first time. I'm surprised they haven't got involved in rugby league, to be fair. That would be a great opportunity for them, considering at the moment the situation of rugby league's finances. If a sponsor like Red Bull could come in, that could be a game changer. But they haven't as of yet. Now, I find that interesting. But no, Leeds has got a bigger market share, bigger fan base. It's a more recognisable brand globally because they're the 16th wealthiest club in the world, and that's under Sportico rankings. So they've already got an opportunity to take a very, very big entity and make it bigger. Historically successful, established fan base, big fan base. MK Dons, they can't even get 5,000 in their stadium. So Ellen Road, more historical stadium. As I say, established Premier League club, played in Europe, multiple titles historically. Big name players have played for the club, all that kind of stuff. No, I have heard Ian Wright. He has come out and said it's not as good quality. They're a bit robotic. I've heard that statement from Ian Wright. I think he's been critical on the modern state of the game quite a lot recently. To me, MK makes more sense. The Red Bull team is bad. True, but I think you've got to look at where they're now trying to establish footholds in the various markets they're establishing in. Yes, the F1 is based there, true, but they're looking at investment opportunities for the brand that can make them as much money as possible. And when you're looking at Leeds and you're looking at Newcastle, bigger population centres, bigger fan base, and more customers who are going to buy your product with your name attached to that product, which then makes you money as sponsors. Ticket sales, merchandise sales, interest, social media, that kind of thing. They've obviously looked at the social media, looked at how Milton Keynes are getting just ripped. MK Dons are getting ripped pieces on social media week in, week out. Poor crowd numbers, the lack of engagement, the fact the team has never really achieved what it could have achieved. That it's a business. They've gone on a business standpoint. Yes, Milton Keynes could work logistically because they actually own another sports team based in the Milton Keynes area. Yes, you could argue that, but at the same time, they've gone with, we're going to make more money because we're getting our brand out there, attached to a big name brand, Leeds United, rather than Milton Keynes Dons. Brand value. Leeds United brand value is quite strong. Milton Keynes brand value is quite weak. Existing strong value, which can get stronger with a big customer base, weak brand, struggling, not struggling, never going to struggle with selling merchandise. We're going to sell a lot of merchandise. And we've come in as a shirt sponsor, but then for every shirt sold, they get a percentage of that as investors. But they're minority investors. They're not sole. They're not the majority. They are minority investors, but it's a business opportunity for them. Whether they decide later down the line to flip that, make money, is another thing. Well, yeah, there was pushback in both Austria and where Red Bull's actually thought it was an Austrian company, and Germany. Yes, there was massive pushback, massive protests at games regularly, and now their teams are actually starting to struggle a little bit. They've had their success, they've had their window, but there has been a lot of pushback because it goes against the historical culture of things and the tradition of things. They are a disruptor. They've gone from a kind of niche product to a very big, one of the biggest global companies in a very short space of time. But some of their methods have not gone down well in regards to their sports ownership. This is true. A lot of people see it as very corporate, overly corporate, and not in a good way. And yeah, there was a lot of pushback. Yes, but how many trophies have Red Bull Leipzig won? Because last season they didn't do so well. RB Leipzig, well, they're second right now. How many trophies have RB Leipzig actually won? They have spent a lot of money. There's also been court cases as well. So there is that. Yeah, the MK Dons, maybe they should call it Milton Keynes City or something, or Milton Keynes Wanderers, because they obviously left Wimbledon. Obviously, I think that I don't think it's never worked. They've never built a fan base. They play in a stadium that's not suitable. They've got to be losing money. They have to be losing money. No, I have no doubt that MK Dons is not a profitable club at this point in time. They're playing in a stadium that's a Championship Premier League stadium, and they're in like League One or League Two. Yeah, Leipzig again. Like fans of Dynamo Dresden, for example, hate RB Leipzig. There are other fans in Leipzig who never bought in to the Red Bull club because there's other local clubs in the Leipzig area. And then they look at RB Salzburg and how that was dealt with. And yeah, it's the same with ice hockey. They own teams in ice hockey as well. And again, there is that pushback. There is that pushback from fans. Not so much in ice hockey, but there is that pushback. They're not seen as necessarily always the nicest in regards to how they operate as a sport on a sporting standpoint. And but they're a global brand. They've got sports teams based in several continents, let alone countries. Or they're title sponsors of teams, they own teams, or they're in partnership. Like Leeds United, they've gone in as minority stakeholders, so it will still be Leeds United, and they won't be able to take full control, I don't think. In motorsport, apart from obviously the Red Bull outright teams that they own, other teams they've come in as major sponsorship partners, and they're in partnership, but they don't actually own the team. They just sponsor the team and have a financial stake. They do obviously have those personal sponsorships with drivers. They try and tie them up for their entire careers. which is interesting. So what happens if you've got like a driver like Max Verstappen who goes, you know what, I don't want to be a Red Bull driver anymore. I want to change teams or even leave F1 and go to another form of motorsport. Like he's done some GT racing now, but I don't want to do it with Red Bull. I want to do it as a separate entity. That's interesting how they tie they treat some of their drivers really poorly. So there is that. Yeah, Milton Keynes. I don't know what it's not worked. It could. I think Milton Keynes needs a change of ownership and a rebrand. Honestly, a renaming, a rebrand, like Milton Keynes City or something. And Milton Keynes United. Drop the MK, call it Milton Keynes City or Milton Keynes United Football Club. A rebrand and some new ownership. Oh, by far, they make Millwall look fashionable. They make Millwall look friendly and loved. Yeah, no, they're not very well liked. The origin story of the club, it's like you couldn't get a more disliked club from the get-go because of how the whole Wimbledon situation and how there was government interference. There was plans to actually the government were going to interfere and were going to place the club anywhere. They were even looking at placing the team in Dublin. And the government were advised to, and this is in government papers. This was all released, and the Tony Blair's government. This is where politics and sports are a dangerous mix. They were planning with the Premier League and all that to try and actually, in regards to the Northern Ireland peace process, and I know a fair bit about this, but that's for the other channel. But basically, the government under Tony Blair were wanting to make it like a UK Premier League kind of thing, trying to unite. I don't think the government quite understand football tribalism, but they were trying to interfere, and this was one of the things that was planned, and so it was sort of getting government interference, which is not a good thing. And they wanted to move a club. There were several clubs they were considering moving to Dublin, and Wimbledon FC were just they didn't have a home stadium. The club was losing money. Fans were protesting the ownership. Attendance was low at Selhurst Park, and they were the club chosen. And in the end, it ended up at Milton Keynes. And there was government interference. There were government plans to get involved, and it was all declassified. It was discussed at the cabinet table. And this is true. This is not made up. I'm not making this up. Tony Blair's government in the late 90s, well before the club moved to 2000, I think it was 2003 or 2004, they ultimately relocated. Well before then, well before Tony Blair's second term in office, there were discussions, the highest level of government, so the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and Communities, like several government departments were, including the Home Office and the Foreign Office, and they were discussions about using this as a form of diplomatic soft power with the Irish government under Bertie Ahern and placing the team in Dublin at Lansdowne Road. And thankfully that plan didn't take place, because that would have caused a lot of problems. It was seriously considered. Ultimately, they end up in Milton Keynes. And out of that, we get AFC Wimbledon, and the rest is history. And of course, we love AFC. AFC Wimbledon is everyone's favourite club. That isn't their club, and Milton Keynes is everyone's hated club other than Millwall. And the rest is history. But I do feel, because Milton Keynes itself is a very dystopian place. If you've ever been there, it's a weird place to go. It's a pre-planned grid pattern community that was built after World War II. And it is a dystopianly badly designed. It's got city states, but it's badly designed. It really is. Because in order to go right, you've got to take, or to go left, you've got to take, let's say, like 15 rights. You've got to go back on it. It's just weird. It was planned in the 60s, built as this new kind of urbanist place. and it incorporated like Bletchley Park, where the code breakers and all that in World War II, in the village of Bletchley. That's part of Milton Keynes. So there was existing villages, and then you've got the city centre, which used to be the town centre, which is just dystopian. It really is dystopian. It's a very boring place. It's just offices and industrial estates with housing estates that are so far out from the urban core. It's just no, it's not even American. Think of it like Brasilia in Brazil. If you know your geography and your political geography and your urban planning, Brasilia, built at roughly the same time on a grander scale because that's a capital city, which is a lot bigger, but very, very dystopian. Thought to be all this futuristic, and very, very quickly, it was found that the dystopia was real. People who live there hate it, but there's some good jobs there. There are some good jobs there, but it's a really dystopian place. And there's never, apart from the ice hockey team, the MK Lightning, and the junior team, the MK Thunder, there hasn't really ever been a community sports team that locals can focus on that's played at any elite level. And suddenly you get MK Dons just popping up there. And okay, fine. I'm going to give it a thumbs up, like fine, but it's a planned settlement that it's only like what 50, 60 years old. And no, it's not like an American city because American cities have different planning. The way Milton Keynes, it's like one of these futuristic, urbanist, modernist, post-industrial, post-World War II planning. And there's new towns and new cities and Garden City, kind of Welwyn Garden City and all that kind of. Yeah, Stevenage. Well, Bracknell was an existing village. Stevenage actually had an existing village there as well. It makes places like Farnborough and Stevenage and Bracknell and some of the Welwyn Garden City and some of these other, Telford, another one. I've got a friend who lives in Telford actually. I used to live in Bracknell. Obviously, parts of Swindon, little bits of Swindon. Like Magic Roundabout area of Swindon. It makes some of these pre-planned new towns that were built around existing villages with an existing urban core where they just expanded around it. Milton Keynes is not that. Milton Keynes is, we're just going to bulldoze a load of fields. We'll have 6 villages ringing it, and then everything else is going in the middle in a grid pattern. And it doesn't respect the topography, the geography, and the existing history of the area, which goes back. Bletchley Park, for example, very historic building. It's just dystopian. It really is, and yet it's got city status somehow. Well, you think over time, Milton Keynes will get an established fan base. They've had 20 years. They've had over 20 years. And looking at some of the more recent match highlights, and photographs, and video footage, it's not boding well. Not boding well. The fact that they've had 20 years and they still can't grow the fan base in the community tells you a lot. When they were formed, they were what is now a championship club because it was the old Division 1, which was technically the second tier, which would be the Division 2 under the old pre-Premier League system. And AFC Wimbledon got a bigger fan base. So AFC Wimbledon have proven you can do it. Milton Keynes have proven how not to do it. Do I rate Marcus Rashford? If you can get him motivated and fully fit and focused, he's a good player. Wouldn't say he's world class. I'll say he's a good player. He's a solid player. But I think on his day he can be good. However, he is a confidence player. I think unfortunately, towards the end of his time at Manchester United, things obviously went wrong. I don't think he plays for Manchester United again. I think that's his Man United career done. Now, whether he signs somewhere else and suddenly he finds a resurgence, I don't know. I think he's doing all right at Barcelona. He did all right with Villa in patches. He looked better. He looked happier. He looked a bit more involved in the play and things like that. But I don't think he plays for Man United again. I think even though he's still officially a Manchester United player, I think they find a way to try and sell him on, or they send him out on loan again next season. But I think his time in Man United is done. Now, whether he ends up full time at Barcelona or he ends up at another European club or English club, don't know. But I think his Man United career is done. I don't think he plays for the club again. Milton Keynes Football City. Well, their ice hockey team has been more established, and the ice hockey team sells out. Let that sink in. And that arena's 2,000-3,000. So yeah, Milton Keynes Lightning ice hockey team can sell out their arena. MK Dons can't even sell half their stadium allocation seats. So let that sink in. Sometimes there's actually more away fans at the game than home fans. So let that sink in. I wouldn't say Milton Keynes is a non-entity for sport. I just think that take the ice hockey team aside and the F1 teams being based there, it hasn't been grown organically. I think it hasn't been grown organically. I think it's a weird one because there's a lot of transplants because it's actually a very rapidly growing urban area, which is interesting. But people move there from all over the country and all over the world because of the companies based there, the jobs available. There's a lot of university graduates live there. It's an interesting one because there's a lot of transplants. A lot of people who live in Milton Keynes are like first or second generation residents there. So I wouldn't say it's like a transitional community where people come and go, but a lot of people don't stick around Milton Keynes too long. A lot of startups are based in Milton Keynes, then they move out of Milton Keynes and other startups come in because there's actually a link in that area, ironically. Milton Keynes is halfway between Cambridge and Oxford, and it's cheaper because Cambridge and Oxford are very expensive cities, and it's actually cheaper sometimes to start up your company in Cambridge or Oxford, move to Milton Keynes for a bit, you build the company, and then you move on to elsewhere in the country or globally. But there's a lot of engineering and tech firms there, and you know, especially in the tech industry, there's a lot of bouncing around between different companies within that industry. And so, yeah, that some people have spent, 2-3 generations of families have spent there, but it's a fast growing. There's disposable income in Milton Keynes, so I'm surprised in that regard that young families want to take the kids somewhere. I'll be interested to see what the prices are for the football team for tickets. But the attendances are terrible. Absolutely terrible. But winning helps. Winning helps build momentum and gets casual fans becoming hardcore fans, getting new fans in. Winning helps. And because relocations are so alien in our sporting culture, like relocating a team is alien, fought back against, rarely happens, only a couple of teams ever. Variety of sports have been relocated and it hasn't worked. Look at Wasps with rugby union. You look at MK Dons, it hasn't worked. I think there was one ice hockey team relocated once. Ironically, I think it was actually Milton Keynes. I think they were called the Solihull Barons at one point. I think they relocated to Milton Keynes as well. And MK Lightning sort of has worked a little bit, but hasn't. But joke aside, I think there's no natural rivals apart from every club hates MK Dons apart from FC Wimbledon. There's no natural rivalry. The stadium's in a poor location. It's in an industrial estate, so there's no cafes, bars, restaurants, pubs, and hotels nearby. It is not in a good area. So unless they decide to go, right, we're going to develop the area around the stadium into a more kind of hotels, offices, restaurant. I think Wickham and Stevenage would be, maybe Northampton Town as well. But then Wickham, Stevenage, and Northampton Town seem to be performing better on the field as well. It's just they are struggling to fill the stadium. And there's only so much community outreach you can do with local schools in the area and trying to get families through the turnstiles and try and build a fan base that way. And many sports teams have done that where they've done community outreach. So I'd be interested to see what the community outreach is. There's no like player or players like they had in years past coming through the MK system who were doing like suddenly setting the world on fire, creating a lot of interest, like a young Dele Alli, for example, at the moment that I can think of. They're not doing particularly well in regards to their form that I'm aware of. They're not like chasing promotion every season. They're not like working their way up the divisions. It'll be interesting to see what ticket pricing is, what the community outreach is with the local community, with schools, and with colleges, and that kind of working with local community groups to try and get young people involved, get families going to games, like match day tickets, that kind of thing. Other teams and communities have done that really well, where they've done community outreach. They've, as I say, given discounted tickets to young families or disadvantaged kids, and they brought a lot of fans in that way that go to a couple of games, enjoy what they see, and then they come back on their own volition with, and spend the money. It's not as if a bombastic owner's come in and go, right, we're gonna try and make the Premier League with this club and build a fan base through success on the field, and trying to sign players, create interest. Because with Milton Keynes, as I say, it's a lot of transplants, and a lot of them already have their fandom of their sports teams that they're not going to change. They're not going to change their fandom. Well, Dele Alli, I think there was a lot of personal issues with Dele Alli off the field, and it's a wasted talent. And unfortunately, we see a lot of this with professional athletes, where there's a lot of personal trauma as youngsters. There is a lot of personal issues there. There's also some bad advice when it comes to how to invest and spend their money, and they make some. And a lot of professional athletes aren't necessarily, let's say, the smartest in regards to some of their life choices and some of their investments and who they hang around with. Which is why the NBA, for example, currently has this massive gambling scandal that it's been dragged into, because players and coaches have been involved in this gambling operation, this illegal gambling operation that the FBI has, got involved with and is investigating. And there's charges being brought. There's federal charges. There's, I think, 34 individuals, and including some NBA individuals, like the Portland Trailblazers head coach. Some high-profile players have been dragged into this gambling scandal, and decisions like that. And I was listening to I went on Michael Franzese's, the ex-mafia capo, who's now got a YouTube channel, who was basically in charge of the gambling side of the mafia and collecting their debts and bookmaking and that kind of thing. He went to prison. He came out of prison, and while he was in prison, the FBI and the CIA and other law enforcement agencies and the Department of Homeland Security and all that, they recruited him to basically warn professional sports stars, collegiate players, and then also give talks to team executives and coaches about the gambling dangers and what to look out for. And the various leagues actually employ Franzese and the NCAA and various sports teams, get him in. They get the players, they get the coaches, the non-playing staff, even the directors of the team and the board. He gives these seminars, and I went on his YouTube channel the other day, and he basically explains what's going on. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Major League Baseball gambling with Clase and Ortiz, the two Cleveland Guardians players who were suspended earlier this year, midway through the season, just before the trade deadline, wouldn't surprise me if they're also implicated in this gambling sting, because they were, the gambling companies were like, hey, something's going on here. And it's been very murky around them because not a lot's been said. And then you've got that former Toronto Raptors player who was a fringe player. He was playing in the minor league as well, got a life ban from the sport. That was last year. Apparently he's also implicated in this. So this is a wide-ranging FBI operation, which is also involving, a lot of police and law agents. It's based out of New York, but it's involving a lot of jurisdictions in the US in regards to state and city security and policing agencies. And what has come out is some of these, there's been rumors circulating and conspiracy theories surrounding Michael Jordan and potentially some of his gambling. And then I link it into Operation Slapshot, which involved NHL, which involved Wayne Gretzky, Rick Tocchet, Travis Green. These are high-profile players and coaches. Obviously, Wayne Gretzky is the greatest player of all time in the NHL, who are also implicated in a gambling ring similar to what we're seeing with the NBA. And again, organized crime out of New York, the Italian-American mafia were involved, and there were police informants. And there's not a lot of information out there in regards to Operation Slapshot. I'm one of only 2 channels that has covered Operation Slapshot on a video. And it's on the channel, and there's another channel as well, who was a fellow subscriber of this channel and vice versa. And he asked permission to use some of my clips from my video, because I did a lot of the research on it. And then he messaged me and goes, look, I've stumbled across, I've seen your video, I'm researching this, and you're one of the few people I can find who's discussed Operation Slapshot from 2006. And so the major leagues have got a big problem. And now, yes, with the gambling, advertising and sponsorship, yes, there are concerns being raised. And then you have the NBA gambling scandal from 2008 involving Donaghy, the referee. And there were allegations then that he was making in his book that the NBA tried to block, by the way, that referees were being pressured by the league executives to fix matches, give favourable refereeing decisions to certain teams over other teams to get favourable teams to the playoffs and then in finals. And, the NBA got a court order, or they tried to get a court order restricting or blocking publication of the book at the time in 2008, 2009. And, you fast forward 17 years and we've got an even bigger, I think, scandal than what we had 2008, 2006 at the time of Donaghy's arrest and trial and Operation Slapshot. There's definitely, you hear stories about Michael Jordan and some of his poker nights, and there is a story, and again involving Wayne Gretzky in Vegas, where Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky are playing poker in a Vegas casino, which obviously is legal because Nevada is one of the few states pre-2017, I believe, where gambling was legal. In fact, it was the only states where sports gambling was legal until, I think, 2017 or 2019. And they're playing a poker game, a high-stakes poker game in a casino, and Wayne Gretzky tips one of the waitresses like a $10 chip. And Michael Jordan goes, no, we don't do that here. And he goes, here's $1,000. There you go, there's your tip. We don't do that here. We're not cheap. Michael Jordan was well known for some of his poker nights and his gambling. Well known. The Last Dance is mentioned quite regularly. He talks about it quite regularly. Also, the Dream Team in '92, Larry Bird, and and others, have discussed in interviews about Michael Jordan and how he liked a couple of games of poker and blackjack every now and then. And there were rumours towards the end of his career that he was suspended for gambling and that he didn't play every game because there were gambling suspensions, or he was basically benched. And now Michael Jordan never actually, got found, guilty of anything. But there are with what's happening in the NBA now and what's happened with Major League Baseball, the NHL, and the NBA, and even the NFL. There's been gambling allegations about the NFL. Watch the Last Boy Scout, which is fictional. It's a Bruce Willis film. Is it the Last Good Boy Scout? It's a fictional depiction of basically the NFL and gambling and things like that, and goings on. But I believe the Last Good Boy Scout, which is more of a crime film than a sports film, although it's around American football. There is, as a plot line to it, illegal gambling and match fixing, amongst other nefarious things. And then you look at the New York Jets and the New York Mets, for example, the Jets and the Mets. Is it the Jets? No, it's the Giants and the Mets in the 80s, and some of their notorious drug use and gambling stories in baseball and the NFL. It does make you wonder how insidious all this was, because there's a lot made of. I forget who the NFL player was, but he was a meth head, and he's one of the best players of all time, and he's off his tits on meth and crack during games, and he was a New York Giant. And then you've got the New York Mets in baseball, and in the 80s they were a lot of amphetamines, a lot of cocaine, and a lot of steroids, and a lot of crazy stuff going on off the field. And they were a very successful team in the 80s. And there's questions over how bad the culture was, because you've got allegations which have been proven with the NHL in the 80s with drug use, and the 90s. We obviously got the high-profile instance of Grant Fuhr and Bob Probert with their drug problems, but apparently widespread throughout the league at the time. Penny Lindbergh, for example, dies in drink driving accident. Philadelphia Flyers goaltender who died young. Obviously, Ron Hextall comes along and fills the void. And then we obviously know about Paul Gascoigne and Diego Maradona and Carlo Caniggia in association football in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, that kind of thing, with their drug and alcohol problems. And then more recently, Adrian Mutu, about 20 years ago. And then we talk about Jake Livermore and with his cocaine use. And there's a few other players. And then we get to the rugby league side of things and the rugby union side of things in the last 10 years, where it's a lot of players. And it makes you wonder how much more widespread it was in the 80s and the 90s, before social media, before we had camera phones and 24-hour news cycle and satellite TV and the internet. It does make you wonder, because we know about these individual teams and individual players, but it appears to me it was far more widespread than what we were aware of then, and what's obviously happening now. We hear all these stories, especially on a lot of podcasts now. We get the ex-player who played in the 80s and the 90s and into the 2000s. They're on a podcast and they're like, they mention, oh, we can't talk about this. This is a bit more X-rated. And they sort of humorously mention, oh, this guy liked to party. There was a party atmosphere, a few bevies, but you really know there's drink and drugs and there's lots of it. And it does make you wonder about what goes on that we don't see. And yes, sport is a lot more professional now than what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. But some of the stories that are coming out now about players, about coaches, about teams, the dressing room culture at the time, it does make you wonder how much more widespread drug and alcohol use, especially some of the partying antics, are. And I forget the New York Giants player who was on crack. I'm going to hang on one second. Oh, Oh, NFL. Oh, here we go. This is interesting. Well, the Daily Evergreen. This is a really interesting website. I'm just trying to find out who the New York Giants player was. And who is the greatest NFL player to abuse? I don't want. Go away. Go. I really. Lawrence Taylor. That's the one. Lawrence Taylor. So they've got they for the point of making a point, let's avoid all the performance enhancing drugs, so steroids. Purely recreational. The best player is Lawrence Taylor. He was second overall pick in 1981 by the Giants. He had 9 all pro first team all pros, 10 Pro Bowl appearances. He's second all time in sacks, 132 and a half sacks in his career. 81 Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, 81, 82, and 86. 2 Super Bowl rings, first ballot Hall of Famer. And wow. Oh, yeah, I've watched his 60 Minutes interview. He was actually caught twice. Yeah, Lawrence Taylor. I've got to do a video on Lawrence Taylor because that's insane that he was basically high on crack and cocaine. He was high on crack, cocaine, meth, and normal cocaine whilst playing it. He was like a Hall of Famer. It's insane. Is the UK the worst for prices in regards to wanting to watch sports legally? In Europe, we are. I don't know about globally. I think Australia and New Zealand have got some quite high prices when it comes to subscription sports. The US, some of the subscription packages are getting quite expensive as well, and Canada. But in Europe, we are. I don't know about outside of Europe, but Europe, we are. Do I think the current NBA gambling thing will impact the season? Yes, especially if a head coach has been implicated. Yes, and active players, absolutely. I think this will go a lot deeper than the individuals currently indicted. I think there's going to be others. Wouldn't surprise me if athletes. We know there's no smoke without fire. There's been a lot of rumours circulating about match fixing and gambling with professional athletes in this country. Michael Chopra springs to mind, the former football player. He got into gambling debt about 10 or so years ago. I think it's when he was either at Newcastle, Sunderland, or was it Sunderland, or was it Cardiff at the time? And basically, he got very close to having his kneecap smashed in with a claw hammer, and he mentioned that in an interview. He said, "Yeah, I was very, very close to getting kneecapped over my gambling debts." So we've heard rumours circulating about match fixing and gambling rings in regards to association football. There have been allegations. There have been athletes found guilty of match fixing. Football and cricket. There's been, I think, there was a couple of ex-football players went to prison earlier this year. Low level, but they were still trying to match fix. Yeah, the Lakers and Sacramento Kings. Donaghy, the former NBA referee, basically drops hints that the Kings were given poor decisions, and the referees were told to favour the Lakers in that series. And that's one of the allegations he makes in his book that the NBA tried to suppress. That was one of the playoff series that was allegedly, we do have to say allegedly, fixed. Allegations have been made by, we have to understand here that, was it Michael Donaghy was his name? I know his surname was Donaghy, the referee, or Donaghy. He went to prison. He wrote a book in prison. He published the book. Publishers were getting wary because of the legal challenges the NBA were he could afford all the lawyers. And I think the book ultimately got published. But the allegation in the book is some of the playoff series, and I think that is one of the main ones, league head office was pressuring referees in that series to favour the Lakers over the Kings. That's a known series that's under the spotlight in 2002. That's a known, very known series that's under the spotlight. That's been scrutinised for the best part of 2 decades. 2 decades, that playoff series, there's been question marks over the refereeing. I think Donaghy was one of the referees in that series, but there's been question marks over some of the decisions made, the refereeing decisions made, some of the scores at the end. So was there point shaving? Were the Sacramento Kings actively involved, or were they deliberately being officiated against so the Lakers would get that favourable refereeing so they would potentially make the final? But that is definitely, one of the playoff series that is under scrutiny all these years later. But it's very hard to prove because only one individual's come out and has alleged that there may have been pressure from above to referee certain players or certain teams more favourably than others. And there's no one else to substantiate those claims who's come out and said, actually, yeah, I agree with him, or, I'm willing to waive anonymity and go, yes, this was a known thing. But the NBA tried to suppress the publication of that book. So there's no smoke without fire. Now, he got caught. Again, federal investigation, organised crime involvement, gambling debt. Obviously, with what we're seeing now with this current scandal that has dragged in NBA officials and players and coaches. And these are not like the Toronto Raptors player who's a very low profile player, fringe player, not really cutting it in the NBA. He was playing in the G League, the minor league affiliate. But he gets a lifetime ban about 12 months ago. And suddenly you fast forward, you've got Ohtani in Major League Baseball and his interpreter. You then have 2 players, the Cleveland Guardians, Clase and Ortiz. And then 2 months after that, 2-3 months after that, suddenly this federal investigation involving the... There's a lot going on here, and I think more than just the NBA are involved in this. And there's definitely... I wouldn't be surprised if all the major leagues have individuals involved at some point. I think the reasoning for a playoff fix, because a Kings Mets final would lead to bad ratings, so someone fixed it to have 3 in a row in Lakers finals. There is that argument made. So the TV ratings for the last couple of NHL Stanley Cup finals between the Oilers and the Florida Panthers, which the Florida Panthers have won the last 2 Stanley Cups, the ratings in the US haven't been as high, but in Canada, they've actually been up. So on the Canadian side of things, a Canadian team making the Stanley Cup final, good for ratings. In the US, if it's a non-traditional market or a small market, so Florida, even though Miami is quite a big metro area, that is still classed as a small market for NHL standards because it's in the Sun Belt in a non-traditional market. There is an argument that you would rather see an original 6 final, like Toronto or Montreal versus a Rangers or a Blackhawks or a Red Wings or a Bruins. Now, that's not going to happen right now because it's not going to happen because, unfortunately, only the Blackhawks, as an original 6 franchise, are in the West. All the others are Eastern franchises. So it will have to be the Blackhawks versus one of the other 5 original 6. But if it was an all-Canadian final, on which there is a chance, because there's some very good Canadian teams right now, like the Oilers, the Jets, and the Canadians are doing all right, but the Oilers and the Jets in the West are the best Canadian franchises. In the East, the Maple Leafs, have they reached their ceiling? But hypothetically, if one of those Canadian teams was to make the final, the viewership would be fantastic in Canada. The problem is, if it was an all-Canadian final, the viewership south of the border would not be great, outside of traditional markets in the northeast and then along the Canadian border. And there is a debate that the NHL would rather have some of the big US markets outside the traditional markets make a Stanley Cup final for ratings. That unless the LA Kings have a fantastic season, I just don't see it happening. The Red Wings, the Blackhawks, they're not good teams right, or they're rebuilding teams right now. The New York teams aren't doing particularly well. I think the Devils are doing all right, but when it comes to that New York tri-state area, the Devils actually have the smaller fan base rather than the Rangers and the Islanders and the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres just suck. So easy way of looking at it. Boston, transitional period. Both the teams from Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh and Philly, quite a transitional period. And then it starts becoming a little bit more difficult because, yes, the NHL is trying to crack the US market, the growth of the non-traditional areas, and obviously with the failure in Arizona, the potential around Atlanta and Arizona coming back in, and Houston and all this, they're trying to crack some of the big metros in the US. They're trying to grow the sport in those big metros, but the viewership, it's an interesting one. But the last two Stanley Cup finals, the viewership in the US has not been as high as some previous Stanley Cup finals because the Florida Panthers. In saying that, it's a very good team. The fact that the Oilers were part of making the Stanley Cup finals in consecutive years boosted the ratings in Canada and in some parts of the US, but overall the ratings were down. But yes, there was some reasoning that the Lakers could draw more than Sacramento. LA is a bigger metro than Sacramento. It's got the Sacramento metro, I think, is just over 1 million people in total. The city itself is 500,000. LA is like 3.5 million in the city alone. Metro's 9 million plus. It's the viewership. It's the TV market. It's the market viewer. I think that's wrong to look at it like that. But no, there has been some allegations made about that series, but the NBA, there's been a lot of allegations made about the NBA for some time in regards to potential match fixing, or not everything being all above board, and that is where we're at with the NBA. I mean, this current scandal, I think, could do massive damage to the NBA, because the NBA at the moment is considering, whether it should expand. It's a very it's one of the more valuable leagues at the moment, and this scandal is big. It's only obviously in the early stages of the news breaking and what we know about the charges and the amount of people involved, but it has the potential to really hurt the NBA. Well, the Chiefs Eagles. I think people have got a little bit turned off by the Kansas City Chiefs. The Philadelphia Eagles. Philly's always going to have solid viewership. It's one of the biggest cities in the US. It's a big market. Philadelphia is a big market. It is one of the biggest metros in the US. Kansas City, I think people are just getting pissed off with Kansas City. It's a very hated team. But then the Philadelphia Eagles, outside of Philadelphia, people don't like the Eagles either. So you've automatically not necessarily got the best. The fact that the Eagles won, I think, is good for the NFL. But at the same time, I think sports fans are starting to switch off some of these major leagues because they're seeing the same teams year after year make the postseason, make finals and such. And there's questions over, are the salary caps working? How are some teams seemingly successful year after year after year, even though there is a salary cap? And you have to think at a point, hang on, surely this is meant to, create some sort of competitive balance. But yeah, the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays are the ones taking on the LA Dodgers in the World Series, I think that's going to be really good ratings, to be honest. Biggest metro in Canada, second biggest metro in the US. Viewership is going to be quite high. I honestly believe that viewership for that one's going to be quite high. Well, it's not. I know it's not going to be a clean sweep, but the Dodgers are in the World Series again, and if they win, I think it's not a good. I think it hurts Major League Baseball. If the Blue Jays win, which would be the first time in 3 decades, I think that's good in the sense that it's good for Major League Baseball. But is it? Because guess what? The Blue Jays are also a reasonably big spending team because they've got very wealthy owners as well. So it's not as if the Blue Jays are a small market. They are the only Canadian team at the moment because of the Expos obviously moving to Washington, D.C. 2 decades ago. But Toronto is a big North American market. It's a big metro. It's a big city. It's the biggest metro in Canada. I think it's the 3rd biggest metro in North America, maybe the 4th biggest in North America. So this World Series, the Blue Jays winning, I think, is okay for Major League Baseball. I think it's preferable to all fans of baseball, but at the same time, it doesn't help avoid a lockout. I think Major League Baseball's still going for a lockout, and then we've got to ask questions of Rob Manfred and his legacy, and the fact that 2 lockouts are going to be on his CV when he stands down. I think that in itself is not good. I think because of the competitive imbalance and the fact there is no salary floor, that's another problem. There is no salary cap floor because there isn't a salary cap. There's just a luxury tax system, and it's flawed because the wealthy teams will spend and they go, here's the fine. We don't care. Like the Dodgers. They'll go, yeah, whatever. And the Dodgers and the Yankees can just throw money at player contracts where other teams just either can't or their owners don't want to. And there is no salary floor. And so you have got a competitive imbalance, but it doesn't help when players like Bryce Harper are going, we're not going to have a salary cap. Well, then you're going to get locked out and you're not going to get paid. And then what happens? This time next year, we could be discussing a looming lockout. In fact, we are now. There's been no attempt at negotiation already. There's still, I think, a bad taste from the last lockout a couple of years ago, which literally is a couple of years ago. They locked out and had an extension. They fudged the CBA so they can get games played. And with what's going on with the Cleveland Guardians, with the betting scandal there, that's gone quiet. And this is what I find really interesting. I think that goes a lot deeper than what's been made publicly available. And I think that's going to be it's a scandal that's sort of disappeared, but I don't think it has. I think there's more to come out about that. And now with what's happening in the NBA, I think the NFL and NHL as leagues have to be looking at the relationship they have with the gambling companies. Legislators in the US and to a certain extent Canada need to look at the regulations and legislation surrounding sports gambling, advertising, sponsorship. And there needs to be a much deeper conversation because we're now reaching a point where this could seriously blow up. Well, a salary cap comes to the Premier League. Well, they've got the PSI, which are basically the financial fair play rules that have been beefed up. So at some point, there's going to be a salary ceiling, a natural ceiling with the spending rules as they are. Clubs have got to start getting compliant. And if for example, let's say Man United do get relegated or Man City miss out on Europe, that actually hurts the books. And Man City, the only reason why Man City become profitable in the last couple of years is they knew the new spending rules were coming in. And that forced them to become compliant. They were losing money until about 3-4 years. They were losing money. Only one club actually made a profit, an actual profit, coming out of COVID. That was Chelsea, and there was a reason for that. They had a transfer embargo. They couldn't spend on transfers. They could obviously spend on salaries, and they could spend on player bonuses. They couldn't spend money in the transfer market. And I think another club broke even. I think it was Liverpool. I think it was. Like 2 clubs came out of the COVID lockdowns in 2021, 2022, and they released the figures, and 2 clubs were not hemorrhaging money. One of them was under a transfer embargo at the time, which was Chelsea. So, and suddenly now Man City are reporting profits. You're reporting mega losses. Even before COVID, mega losses. They were losing money. That's where the 115 charges has come from, is they were fiddling the books to get round spending rules and sponsorship rules. And they've also committed fraud, which is a criminal offence. But, let's not, ruin a good story. And it was interesting looking at, they did a thing about the European Super League. I remember this vividly. They did a I forget which newspaper. I think it was either Der Spiegel or another, or the Guardian, or it might have been both in together, because Der Spiegel are very, very good at the investigative journalism and hold, especially sports investigative journalism as well. And I remember this, and there was this article published, and how they work out the figures of profit, loss, and revenue, and debt is another thing. But only 2 clubs involved in the European Super League were making money. Well, one was breaking even, and one made a tiny profit because it wasn't allowed to sign players. If a salary cap came to the Premier League, would players go to other leagues? I don't think other leagues could afford their wage demands, because look at Spanish football. They can't afford the wage demands they've got now. They've got some big overpaid players there. Same with Italy. They can't afford the wages. The demands that these players would have for their salaries, the leagues could not afford. So the players have actually got to go, we might have to take a haircut here. Or there's a way around it. You have your standard salary, but then you put in these bonuses, signing bonuses. You work around a salary cap in those initial 2 to 3 years. You give a lot of signing bonuses to players to make up for a salary cap. And then in years to come, those contracts become grandfathered with the bonuses, and then other players coming in, then maybe potentially, yes. But I think the bolt's gone. The bolt's been pulled out the rifle. The horse has jumped over the gate. The pigsty doors are open and the hogs have escaped. I think the farmyard animals have got out, and Farmer Giles has misplaced his tractor keys. I think it's too late for a salary cap. There's only a way around it, would be to have massive signing bonuses and massive end of season bonuses that aren't under the cap, and then you could get around the cap compliance. Because other than that, I can't see it working somehow. There will be clauses in contracts to, like, front load or back load contracts to, again, get around salary cap. And but if a cap's brought in and it's a hard cap, they would find ways in third-party payments in sponsorships. So that'll be getting personal sponsors for players and advertising campaigns for players. And that's where the player agents come in. I think the bigger problem is the lack of transparency in the transfer market and player agents. And also, Barcelona owe 130 million in unpaid transfer fees that haven't been paid yet. Barcelona have bankrupted a couple of other clubs by not paying them in a timely fashion for transfers. So I think a better punishment would be to punish clubs like Barcelona and Real Madrid for their transfer breaches and not paying what they owe. But that's a bad look for football, you see, because we can't have that, because they'll have their Super League, 2 clubs playing each other, El Clasico every week. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think the other leagues actually have enough money behind them to sustain the wages that the Premier League players would be demanding, if I'm honest. There's just not enough clubs with enough money and enough financial stability to sustain the wages. It's just not going to happen. You could argue taxes are low, but then you look at Europe. Actually, the taxes are actually surprisingly high um, for high earners, and if you're caught dodging, you get criminal records. In Spain, you get sentenced to a year and it's suspended. Second offence, you go to prison, and there is no buy your way out of it. And they've pinged a lot of players as tax dodgers, tax evasion, fiddling their taxes, coaches as well. It's El Clasico. I couldn't care less. Two of the most toxic, damaging clubs in football. And people go, "Oh, they're the two biggest clubs in the world." Yeah, but they're killing the sport by their toxic antics, their corruption off the field, which you know about, and UEFA being scared to take them on. It's simple. If we had a governing body with a backbone, Real Madrid and Barcelona would not have pulled half the stunts they pulled. For Real Madrid and Barcelona, people go about, they're these global brands. Football will be nothing. Football will be better off without Barcelona and Real Madrid, if I'm being honest. Football will be much better off. But unfortunately, we are where we are. Yes and no, because Monaco are in the French league. And while they've got obviously the lack of income tax in the country of Monaco, the principality is a thing. A lot of the players actually don't live in Monaco. They live actually outside in the Côte d'Azur because property prices are cheaper. Because property in Monaco is exceptionally expensive. And property outside in some of the small towns and villages outside of Monaco is actually a lot cheaper in France. So, ironically, a lot of the players who play for Monaco don't live in Monaco. They can't actually afford the property prices because wages in French football outside of PSG, the French clubs cannot afford the wage bill. And every other French club has basically got together and said, we're not going to spend money. We can't afford to spend money. We haven't got a TV deal. Attendance at club games is crap. And we can't spend on the same level as PSG. They've broken the system. We cannot afford to sign players and retain players. And it's true. Even Monaco has gone, we're not going to spend the money. We cannot. Even though we got the second wealthiest owner in the league, we're not going to spend the money. We can't sustain it. We can't attract players that we used to. We can't retain the players that we used to. We can't spend the money that we used to because the TV deal's collapsed. Without the TV deal, French football is not. It's a gate-driven league. It is heavily gate-driven. And last year, I did the video on the crisis in French football. And it's true. PSG has broken French football. The French Football Federation and Ligue 1 and Ligue 2, the governing body, the administrators, they can't get a TV deal. They can't. They are unable to get a TV deal at all. No one wants to broadcast the French league. Domestically and even internationally, they're struggling to get partners to pay decent money to broadcast games because PSG has made the league so uncompetitive. It's unreal. And yeah, PSG win the Champions League. And go, yeah, you got the team of superstars. Great. The domestic league's dead. The domestic league is being destroyed. And you look at the best French players, they don't play in France for the most part. For the most part, they don't play in France. You look at the French squad that will be going to the World Cup next year. Most of those players are based in England, Germany, Italy, Spain. There'll be hardly any based in the French league anymore. And some of them have never played in the French top flight ever, or in the French second tier. They were scouted as teenagers, pulled out of the French system, put in the German system, the Italian system, Spanish system, English system, developed by another league, debut in another league, and they've never played a domestic club game in France, a domestic league game. I wouldn't say the German league's dead because Bayer Leverkusen obviously had their, purple patch, Eintracht Frankfurt, 2018, won that cup final, won a European trophy. I wouldn't say German football is dead, but I would say Bayern Munich has damaged the Bundesliga's competitiveness as a whole, and the German national side as a whole is not the team that it was a decade ago before. And a lot of German fans have gone, yeah, but German football fans and German clubs, generally speaking, 50+1 rule. There's a handful of clubs like Leverkusen and Wolfsburg who have big corporate money behind them, but also have fan involvement on the board. And then you have RB Leipzig, who everyone hates. And then you've got, is it Hoffenheim? Is it Hoffenheim or Bleifeld? I think it's Hoffenheim with the really wealthy owner who doesn't really have any fan involvement, but it's his personal plaything. But there is a concern that Bayern's dominance has really hurt the German national side, and you can see the struggle that the German national team has had since 2014. You look at this period of time, and Bayern Munich dominance, and I think that has had a part to play. Yes, and there will come a point where Bayern Munich's dominance does come to an end at some point. But unfortunately, and I do say this, I think the last decade and a half, it's not been good for German football because it's impacted the national side as well. I think that's where the downside has been is yes, club having a lot of success, fine, but I think at some point it does. At some point, there's going to be a point where you're only allowed to sign X amount of players. You've got to develop more players internally. You're only allowed to have X amount of transfer. Clubs are only allowed to bring in X amount of players in the transfer market. There might be rules like that limiting the amount of transfers you bring in and more about youth development, because every German club is actually very, very good at the youth development. That's something the German league is very, very good at all levels, is that youth development and getting players through the system. So there is that. Oh, you mean Hoffenheim don't even play? There's a few clubs that haven't represent one town that play in the next town just because of planning regulation, where they can build the stadium or whatever reasons. But no, Dietmar Hopp, he's not a very popular owner. But even then, I don't think even he is as hated as some clubs and owners. There's a dislike because of how it goes against the traditional aspect of ownership and club structures in Germany. But I don't even think he is as hated as some of the other clubs and club owners around the world and in various leagues. Well, in saying that, yes, the German league, unfortunately, there is that term, the Bayern Liga. That's one of the reasons why I actually started to do the club history series, especially looking at German clubs the way I did, going, you know what, there actually is, a very competitive, historically a very competitive league system. It's just unfortunate that the last decade or so, it has been heavily dominated by Bayern Munich. But it wasn't always the case, and there have been periods, even where in what we call the Bayern era, which is 1970 till now, where there's been periods where they haven't won. There's been periods where they've had down seasons. And Leverkusen proved you can do it if you get the right guy in charge, have the right philosophy, bring in the right players, have the right recruitment structure and youth system. You can do it. Unfortunately, Alonso moves on, and a lot of the players in that squad have moved on, and that was the fear, was that Leverkusen would be pillaged. No, I think it's actually Dortmund. It's Dortmund, I believe, especially when it comes to trophies overall. I don't think it's Nuremberg. I think it's Dortmund. But yeah, Dietmar Hopp, he's a lot more liked than a lot of team owners. I look at a lot of the North American sports, and they actually make some of our dodgy owners here in English and British football look like saints. But we're talking about Bundesliga titles or German league titles, because there's a significant difference before I think it's 1963, I think, So I've done the club histories. There is a significant difference because the old German league or the German title, all the regional leagues would complete, and then maybe like a playoff structure, like an FA Cup, where at the end of the year, the team that went through the playoff structure to get to be German champions, Bundesliga titles, it's Dortmund are second. And overall, Dortmund are the second most successful club in Germany for silverware. But there's some very successful clubs in Germany. Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 70s, for example, there was discussions at the time that their dominance was bad for German football. And that's at a time when Germany had a very good national side, good multiple clubs in Europe doing well. And Borussia Mönchengladbach, the 70s was a scary decade because they won a lot. Absolutely. But when it comes to Bundesliga, Dortmund are the second most successful. The problem is in part potentially the German system, but then why have RB Leipzig, Wolfsburg, and Bayer Leverkusen, how many trophies have they won between themselves? Not a lot, and they've got the big corporate backing, and so it shows that you can have more money than Bayern Munich. You can have a lot of money behind you, and not get a lot of success. And that is facts. What we call the three big corporates, and RB Leipzig are the most hated, but Leverkusen and VfL Wolfsburg aren't necessarily everyone's cup of tea in Germany because of the clubs, but they have not had a lot of success. One league title for Wolfsburg, one league title for Leverkusen, a couple of German cups for Wolfsburg, and I think a German cup, 2 German cups for Leverkusen, and UEFA Cup for Leverkusen, and that's it. So, you can have as much financial backing as you want. Doesn't necessarily bring success. There is also how you structure your club, your recruitment policy, player development policy, player retention policy, club structures, fan involvement. A whole variety of factors go into making a team successful, both in the short, medium, and long term. It's very, very interesting looking at it that the 3 financially backed clubs in Germany don't actually have a lot of success. Between them, they actually don't even make Dortmund's Bundesliga record for titles, for silverware. So that tells you something. No, they're not, Dortmund. They're not. But they've got a bigger fan base than Bayern Munich, and that makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Because when I was a kid in Germany, Dortmund were one of the local teams to where we lived. Although VfL Osnabrück were actually the local side, Borussia Dortmund were the big club locally in that part of Rhineland-Westphalia, where my dad was based. And so you've got Kaiserslautern and Cologne. You've got Osnabrück as well, Hamburg, Bremen, St. Pauli. There were some big clubs in the UK military zone of occupation, where after 1948-49, when civilian government in West Germany is allowed to resume, and it's just where the army bases are based. After a formal occupation where it's just overseas bases now alongside with the Bundeswehr, which is the German army. Those were the clubs that came under the British zone. And so a lot of British service personnel, be it in the Navy, Army, Air Force, they would go to games. And, the locals, the clubs would give them armed forces discounts, and they would go to games. And they still, I don't know how many personnel we got left over in Germany, not a lot, but when my dad was there was a big army presence in northwestern Germany. And so there is that. But no, Dortmund, they've got a bigger fan base than Bayern Munich. They've got a bigger stadium capacity than Bayern Munich. and there's a queue for season tickets. No, Dortmund does a big, because Dortmund, because of how the Rhineland and the Rhine-Westphalia, that part of Western Germany, it's the most populated, the highest population concentration in Germany. The huge proportion of the population of Germany lives in a very narrow corridor along the Rhine River. Munich, you've got 1860 Munich, and ironically, they have a big fan base as well. And so Munich's actually a two-club city, whereas Dortmund is a one-club town. And then you've got the surrounding areas around Dortmund. And then you've got the other clubs in the area like Kaiserslautern, Cologne, Schalke, Bremen. Hanover's got a big fan base. Stuttgart's got a big fan base. But you look at this from the Swiss-French border just above Basel, or Basel, depending on how you pronounce it, if you're French or German speaking. Most people say Basel, which is the German way of saying it, the Swiss German way of saying it. From there all the way up to Hamburg, that is where the majority of the German population lives. Schalke got a massive fan base in Gelsenkirchen. Kaiserslautern have got a big fan base as well. Cologne got a big fan base. Stuttgart got a big fan base. Augsburg, big fan base. Hamburg and St. Pauli have got, that's a big city, is Hamburg. Big population in the Hamburg metro. That's two clubs, 50-50 kind of fan base. There's a lot of Dortmund fans who are British because of the army link, but a lot of ex-army personnel married German women and stayed. There's a lot of expats over there who are British or Canadian who stayed, and they married into German families and they stayed. They've got a fair British following, yes. I've seen more Borussia Dortmund merch than Bayern Munich merch over here over the years. But then again, I don't live that far from a couple of military bases, and there's a lot of retired military personnel who actually live in this area, who at various points were based in Germany, and they're not actually from the southeast, but they're from all over the UK. We're based in Germany, and their home bases, like the Royal Engineers and the Remy, who were my dad's regiment, my uncle's regiment. The old Remy headquarters is only 3-4 miles away from where I live, and the old army headquarters, which is Aldershot, is only about 15-20 miles away from where I live. And there's other military bases linked to the two that are now decommissioned. Some are still active, that are local to me. Like there's my dad's old barracks is like a 15-20 minute drive from my flat, still active. You've got the old RAF Staff College, which obviously was decommissioned in the early 2000s, late 90s, which is up in Bracknell, and a lot of ex-RAF personnel stayed in the area. There's a lot, and so there is that. Well, you've got Union Berlin, which is the Soviet zone, that's East Berlin, and then you've got Hertha Berlin, which is the west side of Berlin. And you could argue, the division of Germany, but you've got FC Magdeburg. There you go. There's an East German club who've had success in Europe. I've got to do a video on FC Magdeburg because they are the only East German club to win European silverware. You've got Dynamo Dresden, massive fan base, second or third division club in Germany, but huge fan base. The Berlin clubs have underperformed in the modern era. That is a given. They have underperformed, and I think. But again, you look at West Germany. Look at the western half of Germany. Take Bayern Munich out of it. You look at the western half of Germany. Look at the amount of clubs in a very small geographical area. In reality, that are competing for players. They're competing for fans. They're competing for sponsors. Leverkusen's in there as well. That industrial area of Germany in the west. Whereas Munich's arse end of nowhere in Bavaria. Munich is down here, like right in the arse end, not too far from the Alps, not too far from the Czech and Austrian border, right down the bottom. And all it's got to compete with locally is 1860. in Munich for players, for fans in the Munich catchment. Now, there are other clubs in Bavaria like Greuther Fürth, Ingolstadt. Yeah, there are other clubs in other towns and cities in Bavaria who played in the Bundesliga and such. But in Munich, you've got 2 clubs. And then outside of Munich, it's very rural. And then you get to Ingolstadt, then you get to Greuther and some of the other, other towns and cities, Regensburg in Bavaria, which is quite a big state in Germany, by the way. It's not tiny. It's quite a big federal state in Germany, but it's surprisingly, the big population centers are very spread out. Whereas in the west, in Bavaria, basically from Stuttgart northwards, so you've got Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Leverkusen is quite a big urban area. You've got Dortmund, you've got Cologne, Aachen, various cities, and they're all very close together, all the way up to Hamburg. You've got a lot of clubs. Yes, you'll have local fans in the city as well. And German football's a bit different, but you've got a lot of clubs where you're competing for players and fans on top of each other. Karl Zeiss Jena. Yeah. Again, East German club. Yeah, but there is that. Yes, Rapid Vienna under the Anschluss were German champions. Yes, there were a couple of Austrian clubs that did quite well under the Anschluss between 1938 and 1950, 55. I'm trying to remember when Austria and Germany, the Anschluss was officially dissolved. It's either 1950 or 1955. Shit. Hang on 1 second. Hang on. Because Austria, with the Anschluss, happens in 1938. So before 1938, you have the Austrian League and the Hungarian League. And before 1918, you have the Austro-Hungarian League system, which is weird. I'm going to have a quick look at this because I want to figure out when Austria basically regains its independence, because it was part of Germany between 38 and it's either 1950 or 1955. So I'm trying to remember what my history class is from GCSE and A-level history, which is going back a good nearly 20 years. I can't. As I said earlier, next year it's been 6-7 months time. It's been, as I say, 20 years since I did my GCSEs. It seems like yesterday, but let's not go there because I feel old. Yes, right. Okay, so so it's a federal state in 1934. So the First Republic is founded in 10th of September 1919. So the Austrian-Hungarian empires collapsed. The Kingdom of Austria and the Kingdom of Hungary continue for like another year officially. So the First Republic of Austria is 1919. It becomes a federal state where, very similar to Germany, with how it's structured, the 1st of May 1934. There was a brief 3-day civil war. Don't ask. I'm going to be very anal when we get to this. The Anschluss happens on the 13th of March 1938. The Second Republic is technically, it's a technicality because it wasn't technically separate from Germany until 55. 27th of April 1945. So as soon as the Second World War, in Austria at least, when the soldiers in Austria have gone, we surrender, Vienna is captured by the Soviets, and they went, right, we're going to, basically the German Wehrmacht in Austria are panicking. They're laying down their arms. Watch Band of Brothers, because the last 2 episodes is actually most of it's set in Austria. Also watch the Big Red one as well, because there's bits of that film towards the end when they're going through Austria into Czechoslovakia, but that's again. So end of April 45, they declare the Second Republic. However, they're still part of Germany, and they're occupied until 1955. Austria was technically part of Germany. So the Austria we see today officially, while the Republic is declared on the 27th of April 1945, they've got to wait 10 years and 2 months to the 27th of July 1955 to be officially independent again. So there you go. God, another political history rant. I've got to stop doing it. We always get off topic. But yeah, so Austria it's interesting. But yeah, the Austrian league, I think both Vienna clubs have actually done quite well in the German league system. I've got to look at Rapid Vienna or Rapid Vienna and Austria Vienna as well, with the two very historical clubs. I've done Sturm Graz. There's a few other Austrian clubs I want to look at some point in the future. It's a very interesting country, Austria. Very interesting. I've been learning a lot about Austria recently over the last few months. Yeah, I do think, again, with the way that the European competitions are now structured, without the Cup Winners' Cup, with these elongated league kind of group stages, the TV deals that are in place, some of the wages that are now being paid out in some of the wealthier leagues, it does make it harder to not only recruit players but retain players. Yeah, that's a problem. Sturm Graz have been pretty good recent seasons. RB Salzburg aren't as dominant as they have been, but the Austrian league doesn't have. This is the problem. Yeah, I think when I did the Sturm Graz video, they've been the dominant side for the last 3-4 years, and I think that is good and bad for Austrian football, if that makes sense. But again, some of the lesser leagues, the Swiss league gets a fair bit of interest, but yeah, some of the lesser leagues, there's less interest, and it's also how they market themselves overseas, and how the American market's bought in, because that Champions League and the European Cup competitions has sort of been a driving force alongside the Premier League a little bit, and some of the big clubs in Italy and Spain. That's sort of been that kind of driving kind of factor. It has had that negative impact on some of the lesser leagues, and that's not good. Yeah, Mulby in Sweden winning the Allsvenskan. Yes, I've seen that, which is a good thing because they nearly went bust not that long ago. They nearly went out of business, but they've got a wide catchment area. While they're based in a small village, there are other villages and towns along that stretch of coast in between Stockholm and Malmö on the south side of Sweden. But they are in that area where they're based in one village, but they cover a big catchment area. And their stadium's only like 7,000, but they sell it out every week. So they're doing something right in their league. Yes, they did win. They've still got a couple of games to go, but they can actually break the points record for the Allsvenskan as well. If they win their remaining games, they can break the points record. So they are trying to make history, much like what Bayer Leverkusen did with their unbeaten season. They're trying to go for a record-breaking points haul, which has stood for. It's only been equalled twice. There's only two clubs that have, at this point in time, got more points in the league than they have. Yet they can actually break the record if they win every remaining game. They've still got a handful of games to play, but it's a summer league, as you see. It's a summer league because of the winter in Sweden. But yes, Mulby have won the Allsvenskan with games to spare. And that's a club breaking the dominance of Helsingborgs and Malmo and the bigger, more established clubs in Sweden that have a lot of success. It's a good thing when another club wins something. It's a good thing. It's like Go Ahead Eagles of Deventer in Holland winning their first trophy in 80 years. Bologna in Italy winning a trophy. Newcastle, Crystal Palace. We were having all these teams end these lengthy trophy droughts or winning their first titles ever. And I think Mulby doing what they've done is 2025 has been a good year in that sense for the underdog, and challenging the established order. And I think I think that's good for football. Well, the Scandinavian clubs with their summer league format, it's the league format that they've agreed upon in part because of the weather conditions. So Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Iceland, they have no choice because do you want to play football in -30 all the time? No, it can get that cold in Scandinavia. It can get colder than that. Some of the coldest temperatures recorded are in Scandinavia. I mean, the Gulf of Bothnia freezes in winter. The Gulf of Riga can freeze in winter. So while it's rare that happens, parts of the Baltic freeze over. It gets cold. I don't think it makes much of a difference. I think that's it's the same with the Republic of Ireland. They've gone for a summer league format for whatever reason. Some leagues do it. It's just the way it is. That's what the domestic leagues have agreed. That's what their FAs have agreed. But it doesn't bother me either way, really. Some leagues do it. Some leagues, it's just. Otherwise, how would you play games, especially in the dark and in snowdrifts and in freezing conditions? It's just not feasible. So they have to do what works for their league and what works with the weather conditions and the geographical conditions that they have. So making it a summer league works for them. Other sports, like rugby league, for example, I don't think it has worked in this country. You could argue that. I think they've tried to parallel with the with the NRL. You could argue that's a good thing for logistical side of things for player movement, but I don't think it's worked for the sport in this country. And I think it's had the kind of a negative kind of it has had some negative impacts. It may make casual. I mean, look, there is a point. I mean, I will say this. There was a point this summer where I just tuned out. I was even tuning out of the NRL. I got to a point where in July, August, and September, I was like, I'm feeling a little bit fatigued with just everything. I wanted a break from rugby league. I think the Women's Rugby World Cup sort of helped with that a little bit, but I got to a point where I felt that I got sports fatigue. And I do think sports fans, well, yes, the Swedish league, the Norwegian league, Finnish league, Icelandic league, they play someone, that's fine. Fair play to them. They obviously, again, as I say, have to work with the geography and the weather conditions and the latitude that they play their leagues at. And so the weather's obviously going to be more likely to be better in summer than winter. And that is what it is. And that's why you noticed a lot of the European club competitions. They don't play a lot of games mid-season. Because now the Scandinavian leagues is going to be their off season. So for them to put out a competitive team when a lot of their players are on their holidays and on their off season is difficult. And so you notice the knockout stages happen after the winter break, and the group stages finish before the winter break. So it allows the Scandinavian players and the Irish players, for example, to enjoy their off season. And you could argue that does hamper the clubs in Europe, but then Bodo Glimt have done quite well in European competition in recent seasons. And look, Malmo made a European final against Nottingham Forest. So sometimes having a summer league is not necessarily a bad thing, but you could argue in the modern day, having that summer league, does it hamper clubs in Europe? Potentially, yes. Yes, I do. I'm not a massive fan of it. I mean, look, we've got 2-3 weeks, another international break. We've got another international break in 3 weeks' time. So that for me is frustrating. Look, we qualified, but Wales and Scotland haven't. So that's makes it kind of interesting that two of the other home nations have still got a chance to qualify. We've got through. They still have to win games, and it's still in their hands. And there's a chance we could have three, potentially even Ireland could make the World Cup. So we could have a good representation at the World Cup. Now, I do get the frustration. I don't mind watching, international football. I think the fact we've now qualified, I'm expecting some squad rotation for these two games coming up from Tuchel. We might see some changes, and he's going to. These are competitive games. We still want to win them. It builds confidence because obviously he's in his first year, and it will build confidence where he can build a relationship with the players and vice versa and combinations. But I think he's going to do some player rotation. I think he's going to look at some combinations and some other players and give some other players some game time, get them confident, and that will give him more options going into next summer. But I can understand the frustration. And then we've got two more international breaks in the second half of the season before the World Cup. So I do think it is frustrating. I understand that. I look on social media. I see the frustration with fans. I go on fan groups. I see the frustration. I think UEFA have noted that frustration. And it's not just from fans here in the UK. It's from fans across Europe. I think UEFA have noted that. I think FIFA have noted that yes, I think there's better. I think next season they're reducing the number of international breaks. Fine, they're reducing it to 3 off from 5 to 3. But they still want to get these games played. Now again, that's going to disrupt seasons. And of course, with the World Cup being expanded, that's going to impact the off season and pre-season as well, because it's an extra week at the World Cup. So it's again fixture congestion, and there is a working group in place where they're having discussions with clubs and governing and local and domestic FAs, players, stakeholders. But I think UEFA got the fans are getting pissed off. It's not good. But UEFA is in a bad position at the moment because they reluctantly agreed to the Spanish game being played in America, even though they got cancelled. But so there's a lack of trust from fans to UEFA in this regard. But yeah, no, I think it does disrupt the season. It is frustrating. Don't get me wrong, I do love my international football. I do. But at the same time, England have qualified from their qualifying group. Other teams still can go for the playoffs and qualification and all that. So the games have to be played. England are going to want to win these games, but will the motivation be there? I think some players will be hungry to try and put a hand up to say you've got to select me for the next internationals in the new year. I think Thomas Tuchel will want to juggle the squad a little bit. Keep some players on their toes. Give some other, see what other players in and around the squad can do. He wants positive headaches for selection. That's the thing. He wants positive headaches for selection. I think, as I say, I think Tuchel is the right guy to take the team forwards. I know there's rumours linking Guardiola as his replacement once the World Cup's up because he's only on a short contract. But I actually think that Tuchel will actually get a contract extension somehow. I do. I honestly believe that. Or Lee Carsley is going to be groomed again as his replacement. I don't think the FA will be able to afford what Guardiola will be demanding in compensation. The problem is so many and not many competitive games. Look, I think you get going and then suddenly it's an international break, and then you get going, it's another international break, and then you get going, it's another international break. And on top of that, you've got league campaign, European League Cup, then FA Cup, and all the other competitions. So you can't build momentum in one competition and then it stops, and it starts, and then your players get off to international camp, get injured, get suspended, whatever happens, to come back, they've got a niggle, they're not fully fit, they've got to rest them, rotate them. And some clubs are more impacted by international call-ups than others. It is a test of squad depth. It does impact momentum and combinations and player fitness and player availability. And it does lead to a fatigue factor, because international teams play a different style and a different intensity to club teams, and there's different tactics. It does impact things, yes. I mean, I've always argued that the off-season should be in between the Euros and the World Cup. The season in between, that's when your qualifying tournament should take place for the European section. And then the following year, you have the Euros and then qualification, World Cup, and do it like that. That's my view on it. That's when I think that's how they should, in my opinion, structure the international break. Club season ends, FA Cup, Premier League, right, playoffs, international window in the summer, qualifiers, end that. Players get a break. Adjust the start. Because you don't have these international breaks, you could actually start the season a little bit later. So you give the players a little bit of a break and then a pre-season, and then start the season in September rather than August. Run from September through to May, international qualifiers or tournament, and do it like that. That's how I would do it. One international qualifying campaign as a short, sharp qualifying tournament, very similar to what we would see at a World Cup, gives the players some kind of experience, all players from all nations, what an international camp's all about, what a tournament camp's all about. Go from that, bosh. And I would delay this, because you haven't got these international breaks 5 times in a season, which is about 8 weeks, I would think, of regular season stoppage. You can start the regular season a few weeks later than August. You can start it in September. And then you can finish in May. So you're not stopping and starting the season 5-6 times. And that's how I would do it. That's how I would do it, personally. It would be very, very... I wouldn't say there's not as many good international teams right now. I just think the general quality of football across the board is not as good as what it was 20 years ago. I've said that before. I think the quality now is good. Some of the lesser nations have improved, but the general quality is not as good. I would say it's the lesser nations have improved, but the overall quality is not as good. And that is, I just think the overall quality is not as good. I think the fatigue factor with the amount of games players are now playing in a season is definitely having an impact. I think now, especially from youth level all the way through to the senior level, they're trying to forge athletes rather than players. And they're overcoached. So it's actually, you're coaching the flair and the excitement out of players. It's just droids. They are basically becoming tactical droids, which is not good. The instinctiveness is being coached out. Problem solving is being coached out. Well, there's a word I'm looking for, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but spontaneity is being coached. That's another word, but there is a word I'm looking for. I think a little bit of common sense as well. Like, play what's in front of you. There's the various things are being sort of coached out of players now, and they're trying to forge more the athlete, the gym athlete, and the physical athlete who's just got a motor on them, who you can just run around all the time. Brazil, Germany, Italy are not as good. That's true. They're not as good as what they were. They aren't. I think Brazil, too many players have been produced by Brazil, but at the same time, it's too many average players. There is a problem in Brazilian football that they're not recognising. It's the style of play they're being forced to play. Samba football is what is Brazil's strength, and that's been coached out of them. It's not fashionable now. And I think that's hurting Brazil, because their natural style is just not being allowed to be represented, because spontaneity and free flowing and playing what's in front of you, they're being forced into a structure that's unnatural to what they play domestically in Brazil and how they grow up playing. It's that Samba football's and that beach football kind of futsal kind of style is not wanted now. You need structure. All about structure. All about fitting a system. Let the system fit the players rather than the players fit the system. There you go. Morocco and Norway, yeah, I think Morocco made a semi-final last time. Let's not knock the Moroccan setup. They've got some good players there. Norway, they've had a good qualifying campaign. Is this a flash in the pan, or is it just Haaland and the other guy Odegaard, and are they just dragging the rest along? Is there more to it? Are the other players up their game, or they're just having a purple patch? Because it's been a long time since Norway were at a World Cup or a Euros. It's been a very long time. Very long time. So there's that. Japan have got some good structures domestically, and they've got some good player development now. They've kicked on, whereas South Korea have sort of stagnated, whereas they've kicked on. So there's that. Mexico have plateaued. Really, they've gone backwards. I think Mexico have gone backwards in the last decade. Because historically Mexico have had some very good players, but they I think have regressed, whereas I think Japan have consistently, slowly but surely, built some good structures. Even before the 2002 World Cup, they built some good structures, sorted out their club game, got the off-field structures in place, the player development in place, marketing the sport. Hosting a World Cup did help, and you see some of their top players playing in Europe and doing quite well. So there is that. I think, no, the peak for Mexico was before then. We're talking like 98 for Mexico, 2002. The Azteca is old, though. Fantastic stadium, but it's old. Imagine if it was to host a third World Cup final, but with a certain president in charge, that's not going to happen. So, unfortunately, while the purists want the Azteca to be where the finals hosted, it's not. It's going to be the Patriots Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which is an NFL stadium, which just doesn't work. But again, I've looked at the stadiums they're going to use. I've got my views on the stadiums they're going to use. Yeah, MetLife. That's Foxborough. That's MetLife. Is the is it the new, or is it where the New York Giants play? I can't remember. It's either where New York, or it's where either the Patriots or the New York Giants, New York Jets play. It's an NFL stadium. Let's not get ourselves. It's an NFL stadium. It's been selected because it's big. But then you look at the price of group stage tickets. It's just that'll be the Giants and the Jets. So yeah, that's New York, although it is not New York. It's in New Jersey. But just not go there. I've looked at the stadiums they're using. A lot of them are NFL, CFL stadiums, because you've got obviously the teams in Canada, the stadiums in Canada. A lot of them are American football stadiums, which is a concern that they're not designed for association football, and they're not. Yeah, we'll see what happens, but there's not enough soccer stadiums that meet World Cup FIFA standard in the US. Technically, yes, the Buffalo Bills are truly the only New York NFL team, yes. Even though like half their fan base is Canadian. But that's again another thing. Let's not talk about the Bills Nation, because the Buffalo Bills, long-suffering fan base. Well, anyone from Buffalo is a long-suffering fan of mediocrity and failure. Although the Buffalo Bills have a decent team right now that are reasonably competitive, the Buffalo Sabres are not. And I was looking at ticket prices for the Buffalo Sabres, and Jesus Christ, they can't sell tickets. They can't sell, even though they actually are technically right now above 500, which means they are technically a playoff team. A month into the season, they can't sell tickets. They are struggling to sell out the KeyBank Arena in Buffalo. They are struggling, and when I say struggling, generally the lowest price tickets between $24 and $28. They're going for as little as $8 a ticket. Yeah, well, at least they made Super Bowls and they were competitive, and they are competitive right now as well, which is really good to see that they are giving it a crack and they're making playoffs and they're a good regular season team. Um, but it is the lack of success in that market, I think, is hurting both teams in that market long term. If the Buffalo Bills suddenly win a Super Bowl, then that changes the dynamic. And yes, the 4 in a row, we can debate about that and some of the refereeing calls and some of the players that missed out and all this. But they've had some great players play for them. They've got a good team right now that has a chance, an outside chance. They're not a favourite, but they're a dark horse. They played quite well last season. They've got a good roster. And there's an opportunity there with the new stadium as well, and some positivity around the organisation at the Buffalo Bills. If they do, imagine if they do win a Super Bowl. It then suddenly changes the dynamic of the fan base in that part of upstate New York. But yes, no, they 4 Super Bowl defeats in a row is not a record they want to keep. But there's nothing to say they won't make another Super Bowl and win. So, and the way they played last year, they got close, and there's definitely a chance that they could do it as an outsider. There is that chance, and we shall see what happens with the Buffalo Bills. But there's a lot of positivity around the organisation. They've got this new stadium that's planned, and they've got a great fan base. Let's not kid us. They have. They do have a really good fan base, a passionate fan base, and there is that. Well, there's fighting in El Clasico. Shame. Not that I really care. I'm not. I think what's happening with Spanish football right now with Real Madrid and Barcelona and the political infighting is actually damaging the La Liga more than them attempting to take a game overseas, which was damaging enough the first time they tried it a few years ago. They tried it again, it didn't work. But I think that might make some Real Madrid fans and a certain Florentino Perez quite happy that Barcelona wanted to take a game overseas, told they now are not, and they lose. Well, Atletico Madrid are ambitious enough. They've got stability with Diego Simeone as manager. I wouldn't say they're not ambitious. They're stably run. There was a period when Simeone took over, the club was in crisis. The club was in crisis, and he has been a stabilising factor. There has been a fair bit of success there as well. They've won some silverware. Let's not kid ourselves. But when he's appointed, the club is lurching from crisis to crisis, struggling, and he's brought stability. So there's a reason why he's been there as long as he has. So there is that. I wouldn't say they're not ambitious enough. There are constraints on the finances. I think they are trying to live within their means somewhat. And they also signed up for the European Super League. Don't forget that. And I think they very quickly realised, well, hang on, we're associated with something that's a negative. And oh, look, 2 of our most hated rivals are also associated with this negative thing, and it's damaging their image. So let's just take that step back. But they realised quite quickly when the European Super League, when they signed up for it, very quickly they went, "This is a bad idea. Let's get out of this quickly." And since then, Real Madrid and Barcelona have their PR side of things in Europe, at least, has not been great. There's a lot. People go, "Oh, these are 2 of the biggest fan club." Yeah, a lot of their fans aren't Spanish. They're what they call the tourist fans, the plastics, and the more local fan bases are toxic as hell. And I don't like either club. Very toxic clubs, bad for football. People go, "Oh, they're big global powerhouses." Yeah, they're bad for football. Move on. Football would be a better place without Barcelona or Real Madrid involved, personally. But that's an unpopular opinion. Mic drop. I've never been a fan of Real Madrid or Barcelona. Don't like them. Never have. I hate the Messi and Ronaldo fanboys. I really do. They're just, yeah. Bella goal. The old play on Batty goal there, Bellingham in El Clasico. Um, that's interesting. But look, I mean, I think you don't like the Premier League dominance. I think it's also had a negative impact for fans in this country. The TV deal doesn't work for fans in this country. And ticket prices are not sustainable. There's a reason why I've slowly, but surely, falling. Well, I wouldn't fall out of love completely because I'm still very passionate about the sport. I just don't follow it as passionately as I used to, and I don't enjoy it as much as I used to. If I was to do my top 5 favourite sports now, football is not one of them. And that's fact. As time has gone on, I've enjoyed the sport less and less. I love the sport less and less. As I get older, I enjoy it less. I don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as what I did a decade, even when I started up this channel 8 years ago. I don't enjoy it anywhere near as much as what I used to a decade ago, 15, 20 years ago. I just don't. I think putting all the European competitions behind a paywall was a bad mistake. Losing Serie A off free-to-air TV, the Bundesliga off all the various European leagues, you would get games. They're off free-to-air TV. The restructuring of the European competitions, the paywall in the way. I am worried about the direction the sport's taking. I really am. And like, I don't know where we go from here. I'm just looking at the championship table. Now, Wrexham are doing all right. Wrexham are 16th. They've got a good little buffer. I think Wrexham are okay. I'm looking at it. It's very interesting. Southampton and Portsmouth are both a point apart and not that far above the bottom 3. My club's out of the bottom 3 at last. Norwich are in trouble. Sheffield United are in trouble. Sheffield Wednesday, I think they're relegated. There's no way Sheffield Wednesday can get out of the situation they're in now. I don't see it. I don't see it. But at Wrexham, Birmingham, it's actually very, very congested. I'm not going to lie. So not including the bottom 3, from 21st, which is Blackburn on 10 points, you have to get to Charlton on 19 and 6th. So 9 points covers 6th to 21st in the championship. That's ridiculous. 9 points covers 2/3 of the league. That is absolutely ridiculous. So from the edge of the relegation places to the edge of the playoff places is just 9 points. All a team's got to do is go on a 3-4 win streak, and teams around them lose a couple, and that's it really. Wrexham are mid-table. Swansea and Wrexham's 2 points apart. 2 points apart, Wrexham and Swansea. Wrexham got 14 points. Swansea got 16. Coventry are top. Middlesbrough, Millwall are 3rd. Bristol City are 4th. Stoke are 5th. And Charlton are 6th. So there you go. You agree that the football's not as good, but you still follow? Yeah, sadly, I've reached a point now where I don't enjoy it. The quality of players. Wow, we've hit 1,600 subscribers. Thank you very much. I don't enjoy it as much. The wage inflation and the transfer market inflation obviously is a big part of the lack of enjoyment that I have. And with that, the ticket prices go up as a result. The TV deal is anti-fan, in my opinion. We were always told the TV deal, for the Premier League would keep ticket prices low. That was a lie. The wage inflation is a massive problem. The transfer fees are a massive problem. The role of player agents is an issue. The role of some of the owners in the game and the breaching of financial rules is a problem. And then we hear about all the scandals. And it's not just the Premier League, it's football in general. There's a lot of scandal. There's a lot of corruption. We know this. And that has an impact on how the sport is perceived. And I've definitely fallen out of love with the sport. I would say around 2014, 2015 is when I finally went, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And then a couple of years later, I started this channel, and then the Neymar transfer happens, and the rest, as I say, is history. And you know, the Neymar transfer is what brought this channel to life. That was the moment where I went, a light bulb goes off. And I always say that's the moment when the light bulb goes off. And then the Newcastle United protracted takeover from 2017 when I started reporting on it to 2021. It took 4 or 5 years, 6 years even, for that to reach its conclusion to the ownership group we have now. Although Amanda Staveley has now sold her stake and has moved on, I think she still has a vested interest, but she's sold. I think she's still involved in the board or in some capacity, but she's basically stepped away from an active ownership role. She sold us. She made money out of it. So she actually made a profit, which tells you something. That protracted takeover saga was another light bulb moment as well. And then I realised, this. Let's go with this. And then the Rugby League World Cup happened in 2017, and the Vegas Golden Knights fantastic debut season happened, and then the rest is history. And we are where we are now, and I really enjoy what we're doing, and it's a nice hobby, and I appreciate obviously all the support and the comments, and those who do leave super chats and super thanks. I appreciate that. It's not a lot, but it goes somewhere, and the memberships, and we don't make I wish I was doing this full time and we could earn the ad revenue, and it was just more than just the occasional super chat and super thanks, and we were running full ad revenue, and it's worth my while doing merchandise and stuff like that. But obviously that's not always you're not always able to do that. But that is that it is. Swansea and Wrexham, I think they'll both be mid-table clubs by end of season. How high do I rate Neymar? Not very. Neymar wouldn't have survived 20 years ago. He really wouldn't. He's an average player with a few step overs. He's a petulant child. He's vastly overrated, and thinks he's better than he actually is. He's not that good a player. His ego and his attitude were bigger than his ability. Highly rated, but underfulfilled potential there. But there's a few players who didn't fully fulfill the potential that they should have, and didn't reach the heights that they should have over the years. So, fuck, I've run out. Do I get another can? Dangerous, because I've got to get up in the morning and I don't want to fall asleep late tonight. Caffeine. Pogba, another player. There's no doubt he's got individual talent. Like, he's got good technical ability. He has got that skill. He can do things, but drugs ban, bad attitude, inconsistent, a nightmare to try. He didn't train well, didn't play well, big attitude, big ego, lack of overall product. Yet somehow he wins trophies. He stole a living as a player, but no. Isha Speed, But like Pogba, much like Neymar, I think unfortunately isn't underfulfilled. I think they'll be very quickly forgotten. Honestly, at the end of the day, I think they people will forget them. Um, I don't think they've got the cult status of some other players. I think especially with Pogba with the drugs ban and some of the other off-field antics to do with Pogba and the dressing room. I think both players were negative negative elements in dressing rooms, and they definitely toxic elements. I don't. They won't be fondly remembered, I don't think. Oh, well, Ronaldinho. Look, he played with a smile on his face. He played for well paid. At one point, I think overall in total, he actually didn't go for that much money in transfers. When people say, "Oh, he went for 36 million," I think it was like, was it at the end? It was like 36 million in transfer fees overall that were paid for him. He was a bargain player, but at the same time, was one of the greatest players ever to play the game. Ronaldinho is one of the greatest players ever to play the game. Could play multiple positions, be a roving player in that forward third. He could pick the ball up deep and just go and run at players. And his body movement is what distracts players, defenders, not what he's doing with the ball. It's what he's doing up around his waist. It's how he's moving his balance. He's got the step overs and the skill, but it's actually his body balance is what is actually distracting the defender, because you can't tackle him because he's distracting you visually, and then he can just, his head stays so stationary as he just moves his body with his head, and then he drop a shoulder and he goes that way. It's weird. The Ronaldinho, I think, is an underrated player. In my opinion, he's underrated. I thought scarily he's underrated as a player. But also such power as well. You forget how much power was in his legs. Very powerful quads. But great balance. Great, that initial explosive power. Stats. No, he just played the game with a smile on his face. That's what made him dangerous. He didn't play with a nasty kind of. There was no nastiness about him. He just played for fun. That's what was scary. He was advanced stats and sports science, I think, have come in a negative way and have ruined. There's too much managing by analytics, too much managing by stats, and I think coaches now are over reliant on sports science and the sports stats and the sports analytics, and I think that's, again, the natural ability of players and the, leave it up to some players just to scan, and it's just, yeah. I miss players running at players. I miss the Ronaldinhos, just getting the ball at their feet and going at a player and running, and then because he's got such good close control, no one can tackle him. Players staying on their feet, they're not rewarded for doing that anymore when they're challenged. You're told to go to ground, so you're basically told to draw the foul rather than actually continue going and play the advantage. And because now you've sucked a defender or two defenders out of play, they're on their arse. They're not in front of you. You've now created space. You're not rewarded for that. The referees have also contributed to where we are by just not playing on. Players don't stay on their feet because they're not rewarded. And when they figured out they weren't rewarded by staying on their feet, because the referee's going to pull it back, even though he could play an advantage, just go to ground, dive. You're rewarded now for simulation rather than actually staying on your feet. And again, it's fouls drawn and all this and sometimes, yeah. Well, I think too many stats now. Again, that's to go with the gambling aspect as well. And it's not just football, it's a lot of sports. There's too much advanced stats and sports analytics. And again, that gambling angle. It is that gambling angle. And Thankfully, I know Australia and New Zealand are starting to grapple with this a little bit. Here in Europe, again, there's now we've reached a plateau. I think North America, the broadcasts, my God, sports broadcast, you got the betting lines, and it's just it's vile. I say bring back the old tobacco sponsorship. Seriously. Um, do we ever get out of what? Well, the sports analytics and the overbearing sports science, sports data kind of that kind of. I don't know. There's going to be a manager who goes sod this. We're going back to basics and win something by doing that. And you're going to need a manager to go right, because every manager who's suddenly been a disruptor. So like Glasner at Palace, Clough at Forest, and Herbert Chapman, obviously at Huddersfield and Arsenal, historically in the 20s and 30s, the first manager to use 4-4-2. You are going to need a manager like that, where they come in and they disrupt the flow of things. So Herbert Chapman is basically the precursor of the modern manager, because he's the first manager to use 4-4-2 as a tactic and make it popular. And he won 3 league titles in a row with Huddersfield, and then he goes on to Arsenal and what they would call the Bank of England club in the 30s. So in the 20s, he wins with Huddersfield by playing 4-4-2 and revolutionising how the game's played, with 2 forwards up front, 2 real wide players, and 2 wing backs, basically, to then fill in when the wide players go forward. So you basically have this 4-4-2. There's always 2 banks of 4 and then 2 players. So you'll either have 2 centre backs staying back, 2 in the midfield, 2 up front, but then the wide players just shift up and shift back. And he revolutionised the game. Most successful English manager of his era. Obviously, sadly, he would die very suddenly. Actually, he would die actually quite young. But Herbert Chapman was a revolutionary. Brian Clough was a revolutionary, just from his man management style and his kind of not aloof attitude, but his kind of sense of humour and the way he dealt. It's Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger. These revolutionary managers, and again, we're talking about in the English game, but we could. And Wenger, a bit revolutionary before he comes to Arsenal, but he revolutionises the English game. But then you've also got managers in other countries as well, and they challenge the established order. Now, what happens is Wenger is the manager who actually brings in the sports science. This is the thing. So Clough and Ferguson are the good man managers. They get the best out of their players because they work out what their strengths are to fit into a system. They're very pragmatic. They get the right personalities to mesh together to make winning squads that win domestically, win in Europe. Wenger is a revolutionary in a different way. So Chapman is the tactics. Clough and Fergie overlap a little bit in the 80s and into the 90s. 70s with Clough, 80s with Fergie, 90s with Wenger. So we see this overlap of these 3 great managers. And they're all managing against each other at the same time. So Herbert Chapman in the 20s and 30s revolutionises tactics in the game. And then we're just talking about English football and Scottish football. We could also be talking about some of the Italian tactics with defensive structures, and we could talk about the Dutch with total football. We could talk about the German pragmatism. But total football only was successful at club level. Didn't work at international level because the Dutch team in '88 aren't playing total football as in the truest sense. It only works for Ajax and Feyenoord and Eindhoven in domestic football and European football, but doesn't work at international level with the Dutch side because they actually lose every final they play apart from '88. But there we go. But you need managers who are revolutionary. Now, when it comes to sports science and sports analytics, we can blame Wenger for that. But at the time he brings it in with his thoughts and his processes, that was revolutionary. So improving the diet, improving the fitness, improving the pre-season training, the post-season training, making sure even in the off-season you're contacting your players, you're talking to you don't let them get too out of shape. Being a bit more rigorous in regards to the party aspect, reducing the alcohol intake. And then you've got Puskás, obviously the Hungarian legend, and some of his style, where he went to unfashionable leagues. Puskás went to Greece. Yes, he was coaching in Greece when Nottingham Forest ultimately go on to win the European Cup. He was coaching at it's either Panathinaikos or Olympiakos. Puskás was coaching in Athens. He was one of the revolutionaries of the Hungarian team of the 50s as a player, becomes a manager, and he's quite revolutionary. You've got multiple revolutionary managers who come along and change the coaching style, the tactics. You've got tiki-taka in Spain, which is various managers are part of that. Pep is part of that. And I think Pep has had a negative impact overall on the quality of football because of his style of play. But Glasner, that's a revolutionary. I like Glasner at Palace. Xabi Alonso with Bayer Leverkusen. He disrupted the German system because that's a domestic record that doesn't get broken. That is apart from if they won against Atalanta, he's done what Arsenal couldn't do, and that's having an unbeaten domestic and European season. But Mourinho is a bit of a revolutionary, and you've got all these Ancelotti. Many Italian managers. Too many for me to remember even the names, but there are many. But I'm looking at some of these, Klinsmann. And what I will say about Klinsmann is his focus on youth development. He might not have been the most successful manager, but he did recognise when Germany are rebuilding after their Euro 2000 exit. And I know they made the final in 2002 in the World Cup, but they're still technically rebuilding to about 2006 when he comes in. Klinsmann and Jurgen Löw as international managers, and I will say this, homegrown talent, youth development. You look at the amount of younger players they brought through their international squads that brought them success. And Klinsmann does that in the US. He looks at the youth system, and it's a key component of his revolutionary thinking is the youth system and youth structures and improving them. So there's different ways of being revolutionary, but I think Wenger is the start of the sports science. The analytics comes later. The analytics is when the Americanization of the sport, and that's from the US. And it's going to take someone to be a Glasner, I think, more pragmatic, a Glasner to change things. A Sean Dyche. People knock him Dycheball, but actually he's very pragmatic. It's gonna take. I think Glasner is the next revolutionary, because if Palace win another trophy with him in charge, I think then we can say yes, he's revolutionising things. Because you look at his track record, and he gets the underdogs to win silverware. Eintracht Frankfurt. I'm just going to leave that there. What he did with Frankfurt, from where they were to where they finished up, and what they're doing now, and the fact they're more consistent in Europe, Glasner. I think he's the revolutionary. And the amount of players he played under him, you say, actually, this guy really knows what he's on about. Ralph Rangnick, a lot of coaches who were players under him have said he's one of the best coaches going. Okay, he hasn't won that much silverware as a coach, but Ralph Rangnick is a revolutionary. But he hasn't got the silverware to back it up. He's only got like one German Cup or something. But there are those who've been coached by Rangnick, who've gone into coaching, who say he is the best coach they've ever had on their own personal development and thinking outside the box. The amount of coaches who are now successful because of Ralph Rangnick, when he coached them, I think Glasner was actually one of the coaches who's worked with Ralph Rangnick. And again, when they interact with him, work with him, they go, yeah, this guy really is as good as people say. I know you've got to look at his track record at Frankfurt and Palace. He's got underdogs to win, and he's very pragmatic. You look at Xabi Alonso, you look at Glasner. I think they're the two revolutionaries at the moment in the game. I think Eddie Howe's a little bit of a revolutionary in a sense that the way Newcastle play, he actually plays with wingers. With wingers actually run at players. They actually have the ball at their feet and run. Who's the Bournemouth manager at the moment? Areola? I think he's doing a good job. I think he's shaking things up a little bit. I don't think Arteta is revolutionary in a sense. He's had a long time at Arsenal with only one major trophy and a couple of charity shields. I would say Eddie Howe is, yes. I would say Eddie Howe is absolutely. You could argue Will Still, even though he's struggling at Southampton, but Southampton are a bit of a basket case club at the moment with how the last couple of years have gone. With what he did in France, with how he got into management through a computer game, you could argue, yes, he's used Football Manager as his way in to figure out how to do it, but he's actually worked out really well, very, very quickly, how you can actually use scouting. He's used scouting as part of his background. Scotty Parker, yeah, I like Scotty Parker. I think he's solid. He's young. He's hungry. I think Stuart Pearce was underrated. I think Stuart Pearce should have been given a bit more of a crack in management with England, because he set the wheels in motion for the young players to then go onto the senior squad. I think Stuart Pearce didn't get the crack with England that I think he should have. But actually, Eddie Howe's made a few cup finals, and it took Newcastle less time to win their first trophy with the money than Man City. So I think Eddie Howe's doing all right. I really do. But no, we'll see what happens. There's some good young managers out there, and I think Glasner and Xabi Alonso for me are the revolutionaries at the moment, who are just changing it with the way they use a high press and counter attack, and they don't need the ball all the time. And they play anti-possession football, but fast-paced counter attack as their preferred style. I think they're the revolutionaries. Jurgen Klopp, I think, could be classed as a bit of a revolutionary, and he does have the success to back it up. Again, with that 4-3-3, high-energy press, and a bit of pragmatism when he's got all his available pieces to him and his strongest possible team. Yeah, I think Klopp was a little bit of a revolutionary, but unfortunately he's now gone into a director of football kind of role, and he's come out of the managing coaching side and gone into a more of an admin side, and I think that's interesting why he's decided to do that. But then you've got Jock Stein back in the day. You've obviously got Busby and some of the managers of yesteryear, and then you've got managers now. I always say you've got to start with Herbert Chapman as the first proper revolutionary in how the sport was played, and then ever since then, almost every generation, there's at least one or two managers that tweak it, and come up and challenge the established order. No, you've got to look at Glasner's track record so far with what he's done with Frankfurt and now with Crystal Palace. He has got a track record of making teams better and getting them silverware when not expected, and doing it in big pressure, one-off games like cup finals. I think Palace will want to keep him around long term. They really will. They don't want it to be a one-off. I do want to see stress that. Anyway, it's now 6 p.m. I need to get some dinner sorted out. Oh God, someone has stated I should not cut my... I've just had a comment, right? Do not cut your hair until Blackburn... Oh God, I've got to read this properly on my bloody app. Hang on a sec. This is ridiculous, because there's that Man United fan who's not going to cut his hair until they win like 5 games in a row or something, and he's not cut his hair. He's got the big fro at the moment. Someone has just posted a comment. Oh Christ! Right, listen to this. Don't cut your hair until Blackburn get promoted. That's no. I don't want to look like Jesus, because I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime now. With not with the Venky's in charge, it won't happen. It won't happen with the ownership. It just won't. Just going to go out there. It's not going to happen with the current ownership, and that is a very dangerous thing, because I would be like Gandalf. I would look like Gandalf, and that would be ridiculous. Although I am tempted to grow the hair again, and see how long I can get it. But that's again a very, very dangerous challenge to put down there. But as I was saying, I'm gonna going to call that a stream. I think we've had some really interesting questions. We've discussed a lot of interesting things. I'm going to keep my eye on what's happening with this NBA betting, gambling kind of scandal that's ongoing and the criminal investigation. Obviously, it's an active federal investigation. So I'm not an expert on state and federal law, obviously, in the US, but there's some very serious charges that have been brought by the various district attorneys and then the government lawyers and all that in regards to the charges. And I think there's a lot more to come out about this, and I don't think this is the end of the of things. I think there's going to be more to come out, more indictments, more charges brought, more people in the sporting world, in the major leagues, are going to get implicated. I have no doubt on that. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg that could be a massive scandal that could impact a lot of professional sport in the US and Canada. I really do. The fact you've got a head coach of an NBA team charged with wire fraud in, and money laundering and a whole host of other charges is very serious. Very serious. So we're going to keep an eye on this NBA scandal and the Major League Baseball as well, those two suspended players in Clase and Ortiz, because that's gone very quiet on what's been going on there over the last couple of months. And I do believe they are linked. I honestly do. And we shall see what comes of it, but these are some very serious charges, and it's obviously this is not an investigation that just happened overnight. This is something that's been on an ongoing investigation for some time. To have wiretaps and court orders and charges of this nature, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see what comes of it. But for me, for now, thank you very much for watching. Oh God, I feel ancient. I've got a numb foot now. I've been sat on my foot for 3 hours and I can't feel my right. This is going to be fun. Walking to the kitchen. Hopefully I don't fall over. Probably will know, mate. But yeah, it's been an interesting stream. I really appreciate all the questions, and yeah, there's a few things to keep our eyes on in regards to ongoing stories. And for me, for now, it is goodbye. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching and engaging and asking the questions. I really appreciate it, and I'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.